regular meeting of the City Commission for June 18th, 2014. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Mum?
Here.
Commissioner Pauley?
Here.
Commissioner Roth? And Mayor Neely.
Here. Will you please join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We can go directly into citizens' comments for items that are not on the agenda. And I have before us Tom O'Brien and Linda Orzen. Would you please come forward and speak in that order?
Hers is more important.
That's not the way I do things. The first person called is the person who speaks first.
If you insist.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm here to make some comments relative to one of your goals. Goal 4 talks about seek opportunities to maintain communications with citizens and facilitate citizen participation. Recently, as you are probably aware, I just returned from a lengthy absence. And when I returned, I discovered that city staff had not done a very effective job of communicating with the neighborhood about a 3-month closure of a street in our neighborhood. Neither chair was contacted. The map that I've handed out is, and I recognize that there's no requirement that staff should talk to the neighborhood, but I think a lengthy closure of that nature, at least it would be common courtesy to let us know what's going on. If you look at the map before you, the section of roadway that is closed is highlighted in yellow. None of the residents to the right or lower right who actually live on Hazelnut Drive received notice. Yet folks several blocks away, such as the mayor, did receive notice. I found that interesting. And that's the only comments I have. This particular development that it's required the closure, they didn't have to bring their development before our neighborhood association. They found a loophole in the state law that allowed them to go forward without ever bringing it to the public. I get the impression sometimes that this particular development or developer has some abilities to do things in Oregon City that others don't. I'll leave it at that.
I'm glad you called. I'm glad I called you forward first. We'll probably get a more upbeat thing. I won't ask staff to comment on that unless they want to do so at this time. Unless they want to do so under the manager's report. I don't recall getting the notice, but if you said I did, I assume I did.
Well, the numbered lots there, the ones that supposedly received a notice.
I noticed
yours is a numbered lot.
Oh, okay. I noticed the closure, of course, but yes.
Mayor, one thing that's interesting is I didn't receive notice of the complaint that we just heard, and so I can't address it because I don't know what notice was sent out or what Public Works did. But this is one way to receive notice, I guess, just like others. But we'll look into it.
Okay. Thank
you. Picture, please. Thank you, ma'am. I am here this evening to officially thank the City of Oregon City and the Hamlet of Beaver Creek for helping us pass the bond measure 3-435 for the library. And I'm hoping I'm pushing the right buttons here. Yes, first I would like to thank all of the PAC members who did various positions for the campaign. Worked for I don't know how many months tirelessly, meeting every single week and going to different meetings and writing letters and just doing all types of wonderful, wonderful things. We also had many, many contributors to the PAC that enabled us to buy signs and do door hangers and put together a lot of other information. Many in-kind donations also from city businesses. JQ Graphics, a private person, Alice Shear, who did our website, which turned out wonderful, Buell's Impressions, Magnetic Signs, Carol Pauley for a meeting place, and the Living Room Bistro. Letters of support, we really appreciated the letters of support from Representative Brent Barton and Bill Kinnemer, who came together from different sides of the aisle to write a letter of support for us. Our Oregon State Library retired. The League of Women Voters also wrote a letter, and one was written by our former mayor, Alice Norris. Voters Pamphlet supporters who helped us put in 5 letters of support into the voters pamphlet. We really appreciate that. All the support from the different foundations, Business Alliance, and Oregon City Chamber of Commerce. So we had support coming from all over the city, business-wise and neighborhoods. Hamlet of Beaver Creek members helped us canvass, even though they couldn't vote on it. They thought it was very, very important to have our library expanded. Also, Oregon City News was extremely supportive of us, and we couldn't have done it without Maureen Cole, our library director. And definitely a really fun person to work with.
Hear, hear.
And special thanks to Mayor, City Commissioners for unanimously backing the decision to expand our Carnegie, which brings Andrew Carnegie's vision into a reality in 2014. And thank you, Oregon City, for showing your support. And shamelessly, I am also inviting everybody to our art show this weekend. It's the 2nd annual Carnegie Art Show, 101 years of our Carnegie Library. And also, I think we might even have a little birthday party for somebody that day. I'm not sure.
For the library, right?
For the library director.
I know for a fact she's under 70 years old.
She is under, she's under 100 years old also.
Oh, I'm so fun.
At this time, I would like to make a presentation to the foundation. We had money left over from the PAC, and we voted unanimously to donate whatever we had left over. We had almost $600 left over for the foundation kickoff for our new library.
I just want to say a big thank you to Linda Orzen and the members of the PAC who did such a phenomenal job of getting this bond measure passed. Yes, I can say it again. I want to say thank you on behalf of the Oregon City Library Foundation to Linda Orzen and the members of the PAC who did such a great job of getting this bond measure passed. We know that the bond is going to provide us with a really great space. We also know that there's always going to be opportunity for private investment in this space and for the public to really put their stamp on that. And that's what the foundation is going to do, is to add value. So we're looking forward to doing that. Excited about this. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, City.
Could I just jump in and say 100 billion thanks to Linda Orzen and the PAC. Linda is just phenomenal. She totally jumped in when she was needed, where she was needed, and the PAC just did a great job. Without them, we just would not have won by 67.5% for sure. So, thank you very much. Yep.
Teamwork.
I wish to extend another appreciation, and that is to the library board. When we were looking at this, I think there was something of a consensus on the part of the city commission that we ought to be looking more centrally in the district for a location. The reason being is because our district goes beyond Redland, goes beyond Beaver Creek, goes beyond Carrots. It's a huge, geographically it's an enormous district, and we're talking about something more central. And as the library board looked at various sites in the process, and also there were polls taken of library users to see what they wanted, the focus became the current site for the expansion. And the fact that the library board unanimously made that recommendation to the city commission, and recognizing that 3 of these 7 members of the library board lived outside the city boundaries, one all the way up in Upper Highland Road, still felt that the best site is where the library had always been. And that turned around the commission as well. I mean, the commission unanimously supported that decision as well. So I want to extend thanks to the library board as well.
Thank you. Great job.
Now back to mundane business.
Thanks, you guys.
This is we've had the opportunity. I don't see anybody else for items not on the agenda. So we're going to go into the adoption of the agenda. Is there anything anybody wants pulled from the consent agenda? Hearing none, no. We'll just go ahead and proceed with the first thing of the public hearings. We had one that was continued, ordinance for introduction 141007, proposed zone change from R10 single family to R8 single family, and a 27 lot subdivision located between James Street and Holcomb Boulevard. And we'll go to Commissioner, our Community Development Director, Tony Conkle. We actually had this before us at the last meeting. We continued it because the Planning Commission had not yet rendered a decision, but we did take public testimony and also recommended to those people giving public testimony to give that testimony to the Planning Commission as well, so it be entered onto the record. And with that,
okay. They need to go through their ex parte.
Yeah.
So tonight I'll have Pete Walter be presenting the staff report. The applicant is here to make their presentation. Bill will walk through the regulatory requirements for the hearing tonight, disclose any ex parte contacts, conflict of interest or bias. And then we'd maybe like to propose, we have time limits identified for the hearing. May help with this, what we're trying at the Planning Commission is allow us, staff, and the applicant to get through our presentation in our time limit, and then obviously there'll be questions. Maybe we could save those to the end when we're done presenting instead of trying to answer them while we're presenting, which may help us a little bit with our time management on this. It would just be one suggestion to consider when we move through tonight.
That's fine.
We'll start with the staff report, and then
okay.
When the hearing opens, I'll jump in with the.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Pete Walter. I'm Associate Planner with the Planning Division, and I reviewed the application before you. Planning file TP 1401 and zone change ZC 1401. Owners of the property are Terry and Renee Voss and Stephen Jones. Applicant is Icon Construction and Development, represented by Rick Givens, planning consultant, and Bruce Golson with Theta Engineering. The applicant is seeking approval for a zone change from R10 single family dwelling district to R8 single family dwelling district, along with a 27 lot subdivision. Location of this property, there's 3 tax lots. Tax lot 22E 21DC 1600, which has no address. Tax lot 22E 21DC 1300, which is addressed at 14550 Ames Street, Oregon City. And tax lot 22E 28AB 1600, which is addressed at 14591 Holcomb Boulevard. So the property is between Ames Street and Holcomb Boulevard in the Park Place neighborhood. And the Planning Commission has reviewed this application on 2 separate public hearing dates, May 12th, 2014 and June 9th, 2014. So I have a brief PowerPoint I'm going to go through. And I have the preliminary plan of the development up here as well, so we can refer back to that. So, this is an aerial view of the property. It's located west of, just immediately west of Holcomb Elementary School. And the Holcomb School Road is the public road that provides access to the property on the south side. And access to the property is provided by Ames Street on the north side. Property is located just south of the Sunnyside Estates subdivision, which was approved in 2006.
Can you work your mouse just to kind of, or are you going to get it on the screen? There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the Sunnybrook Estates subdivision. The red line here indicates the city urban growth boundary and the city limit. So just north of the Sunnybrook Estates subdivision is the Sears Nursery, and to the north and east of there is agricultural nursery land. And this property has been zoned R10 for some time now. And you can see to the west and south there are subdivisions in Oregon City, various zonings. So I'll show you the zoning map. If I can get this to work. Sorry. One moment. I'm going to close out some of these other windows so I can. The proposed zoning for the property, the 2 southernmost tax lots, the applicant's requesting a zoning to R8. The R8 zoning is supported by the low density comprehensive plan designation, and as a result of this rezoning, the subdivision that's proposed could build an additional 2 lots. That is what they proposed, so 27 lots as opposed to 25 lots under R10 zoning. And based on our analysis, the average size of the lots that are proposed within the R8 zoning is about 9,000 square feet. The average size of the lots in the R10 portion of the property is right at 10,000, just over 10,000. This is the revised site plan. The property does have the Barlow Road historic road corridor crossing the property. And the applicant has proposed to include the visual corridor easement in the plan. Without any modifications. So pursuant to our historic review policy, historic review board approval is not required if the applicant does not propose any modification to the historic visual easement.
Can you show where that is?
Sure.
On the previous
Got a-
slide with your mouse.
This is a better slide. This is a blow-up of what that looks like in relation to the proposed layout. So it affects the lots that are indicated here on the southern tax lot.
So that would just be green space then?
Actually, their code provides that the visual corridor easement can have some obstructions in it. It is allowed to have streets and fences and certain types of things, but not actual structures, buildings, and those sorts of things. So that is the way the code is written today. And there's a condition of approval that the Planning Commission revised to require not only that the plat of the subdivision make reference to the visual corridor easement, but that those lots that are affected by the easement have a restrictive covenant or deed restriction attached to the land and those parcels in question for full disclosure to any subsequent property owner that the Barlow Road easement is there and what those restrictions are in terms of the city code.
Thank you.
Sure. With respect to the zone change criteria, the zone change must show compliance with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plans. We spend quite a bit of time analyzing that in our staff report. Of particular importance are the goals and policies related to the city's efficient use of land within the city limits and efficient use of existing public service availability within the city limits, as well as the need to provide additional lot sizes, housing price ranges, and diversity of housing types within each of our land use designations. Now, as I mentioned, the comprehensive plan designation here is not changing. It is remaining low-density residential. The zone change that's proposed implements that low-density residential category. The second zone change criterion is the adequacy of public facilities and services, water, sewer, storm drainage, transportation, schools, police, and fire protection prior to any issuance of a certificate of occupancy in the development. The third is that land uses be consistent with the existing or planned function and capacity and level of service of our transportation system and with the transportation planning rule of the state. And fourth, that if our comprehensive plan does not provide adequate protection, that statewide planning goals be met. But our comprehensive plan is in compliance with statewide planning goals. So we have addressed that. Planning Commission found that these criteria have been met. We also reviewed the subdivision for approval criteria, and these are listed here. They're quite numerous, and they have to do with the site-specific improvements that the applicant is making to the property, how the stormwater and sewer and streets are laid out, and what, if any, protections are necessary for trees on the property and mitigations thereto. The property is not within any overlay districts at all, so it doesn't have any natural resource or geologic hazard overlays. And the Planning Commission found that those criteria have been met as well. To look at transportation in a little more detail, the application does provide needed local street and multimodal connectivity, and I'll show you a picture of our plan that illustrates that, in accordance with our transportation system plan. The applicant provided a detailed traffic impact analysis according to our guidelines for preparation of those analyses, and that was reviewed in accordance with our adopted standards and found to meet levels of service and capacity standards for the required intersections that were analyzed. All local streets will be improved to city standards. Pedestrian access ways have been proposed to shorten walks to the school where the block lengths exceed 330 feet in one situation. The traffic impacts were found to be fairly minimal since this is 27 lots as opposed to 25 lots. Off-site intersections were found to all operate within the standards prescribed in our transportation system plan and street standards. And based on that, no off-site mitigation was found to be necessary by our traffic consultants. Planning Commission found that these criteria have been met. The proposed layout implements the TSP multimodal connectivity plan, which I'll show you, by providing a needed additional local street connection through and to the parcel and connecting to Holcomb School Road. And this is a close-up of what that connectivity plan looks like in the TSP. The arrows here, the 4 arrows within this yellow circle, are pretty much exactly the street connections that the applicant has proposed. And this gray line here is the current extent of Holcomb School Road. So the school and the housing authority are in agreement with the applicant and are moving forward towards finalizing road dedications to complete the street connection here and have the applicant construct a complete local street connection to Holcomb School Road that will be safer. When it's constructed, it will have a stop sign and those sorts of things. The transportation impact analysis really looked hard at this interchange of Holcomb School Road and Holcomb Boulevard and found that it meets our standards for operations. The Planning Commission's conditions that were changed or revised, I'm just going to list the 4 that they were that changed. With respect to the pedestrian access way, this just prescribes what is in the code with respect to how it's constructed. It would be built 15-foot wide from Pastures Way to the eastern boundary of the property and connect to the school walking path, which the applicant has proposed to assist the school with construction of the walking path off-site. And it would connect to that and include a 5-foot planter strip with trees, a 7-foot paved section, and a 3-foot planter strip with plantings per code, along with pedestrian scale lighting and adequate lighting at either end of that access way to make it safe. With respect to the Barlow Trail, I mentioned that the plat note has certain restrictions, and those are specifically that no new building or sign construction is permitted within required open visual corridors. Landscaping, parking, streets, driveways are permitted within required open visual corridors, and the applicant shall cause to be recorded a deed restriction, restrictive covenant, or other document to be approved by the city attorney that provides disclosure of the Barlow Road Historic Corridor easement on all affected parcels prior to recordation of the final plat of the subdivision. Condition of approval number 30 is for traffic calming. There were concerns about speed of traffic on local streets going through the development, and the applicant is amenable to providing traffic calming that meets city standards. We do have some speed bumps in some of our subdivisions that are effective. We also have curb bump outs in our newer subdivisions, which are effective as well because they provide a shorter connection for a pedestrian across that road pavement. So one of those measures will need to be reviewed and approved by the city engineer for Pastures Way as a condition of approval. Finally, condition of approval 31, the applicant has proposed off-site improvements approximately an eighth of a mile away at the intersection of Swan Avenue and Ames Street intersection in response to neighbors' concerns about paving and drainage improvements. This was not a requirement of the subdivision, but was offered by the applicant. And subsequently, we included a condition of approval number 31, that any paving or draining improvements at that intersection shall be reviewed by the city engineer. In summary, the Planning Commission found that the zone change would have no adverse impact on public facilities or the city transportation system. The proposed zone change has met all of the city code and comprehensive plan requirements, as well as the subdivision, with the conditions recommended by staff and Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission has voted 4-3 to recommend approval to the City Commission.
And those are on the 4 items, is that right?
Well, there are the 4 additional revised conditions of approval in addition to the ones that were in the staff report originally.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those.
It was, were there specific conditions of approval that the 3 had problems with? I've seen,
Well, what happened between the first and the second hearing, the application was revised from 29 lots down to 27. The block changed. The Barlow Road easement, which had not been previously identified because it wasn't called out very well on the tax map, was we were notified of that, and subsequently some changes were made. The block length shortened, and where there had been a pedestrian access way through the entirety of the development, there was no longer a need to, just on the one block on the east side that exceeds 330 feet. So that was a change, and that affected the one dealing with pedestrian access way. On the Barlow Road, as I said, they added the requirement for a deed restriction, not just a plat note. And with respect to the other, let's see,
drainage,
traffic calming, and the drainage improvements at Swan and Ames. Well, those were the 4 that were recommended by staff and adopted by the Planning Commission.
the 3 against, were they the conditions that the Planning Commission is recommending, or were they ones of staff?
Votes against?
Do you know what conditions they specifically were?
Not specifically.
Okay.
One had to do with off-site drainage impacts related to the storm pond. The feeling from that commissioner was that the findings of our city engineer were, well, they didn't support her opinion. So, but the other two votes, I believe, are based on a feeling that it was just incompatible with the adjacent neighborhood.
Okay, coming, if I mind, in terms of those conditions, the drainage piece we do, and I was looking for the photograph, I saw it here, it was discussed at the last meeting, but I see the documentation here was in the report about the ditch. Now,
Up here at the intersection of Ames and Swan?
Yeah, up
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
could you point out roughly where this ditch is?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mayor, do you mean the ditch
There
that
is
the
a
storm
private
pond drains into?
Right.
The
So,
private
That's right,
ditch.
there's a private ditch, I believe.
okay, so there's a ditch that immediately butts the northern part of the Sunnybrook Estates development, and it also runs, there's a swale that runs north, starting at approximately the school property, end of the school property parking lot, runs north, and then it becomes a deeper, more incised farm ditch that runs along the property, outside the property here. And then it follows the nursery and greenhouses east to west, and then it proceeds north along this property here. And the concern was, so what's been proposed is a detention pond here, and when this detention pond in Sunnybrook Estates in the northeast part of this existing subdivision was developed, they engineered that pond with a expectation that this area would also drain into it. So there's already some capacity in that pond, but there's also the applicant is also proposing additional detention facilities on site here.
And that's part of the part of the development agreement. I mean, that's part of
the requirement.
Requirement, okay.
Yeah, for stormwater detention on site.
now
Yeah.
the transfer of water out of these retention ponds going into a stormwater system. Do you feel that the development that we're going to see here is going to impact that ditch at all, or will this water, or the water produced by this subdivision pretty well be dealt with with the storm water system coming in?
Well, our development services engineer reviewed that and felt confident that it would be adequate with both ponds functioning, it would be more than adequate to handle the stormwater. And the armored ditch that leads out, everything will ultimately drain into this storm pond, and there is an armored outfall that attaches into the drainage ditch without needing to trespass on the adjacent property, and that meets city standards. So the applicant had addressed this in detail during the public hearing, including photographs, and there was also a lot of public testimony with regard to that ditch. It should be noted that that ditch is adjacent to farmland and nurseries that has bare soil over a large expanse that does drain into it.
Does that ditch drain to the north or to the south?
To the north.
The north.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, and to expand on your, the storm pond is designed to the standards that are adopted by the city for how we treat and release water in these developments, and it will be designed to meet or exceed that standard, and that's the standard that we've adopted as acceptable.
The ditch is on private land, right?
It is.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's outside the city, right? The city limits. Okay.
Okay. I think that's the. Oh, on the easement, in terms of the adjacent property owners,
Right.
how is that restriction memorialized?
So that would be recorded against the title of the property.
And any sale of that property, the future owner will be notified of that restriction.
Well, in terms of, it would be incumbent on them to read their title in order to see it.
I mean, when I've had restrictions on my property, the real estate person advised me of those restrictions.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any legal requirement that they do so.
Typically, they would, and when you purchase property, you'll get the deed that should have this on. In addition, you'll get your title report that notes the exceptions, and it'll show up as an exception because it's a recorded deed. Certainly, a competent real estate professional would point it out.
Right.
Are every real estate professional competent? They should.
So the commission requested additional. So per our code, it's identified on the plat. So if this is approved, they record a plat that establishes these lots. That easement will be identified, and there'll be a description of what it is. So then the planning commission added the additional condition to attach it through a covenant or other mechanism so it shows up on the title as well. So it would be in two places. At some point, you're responsible to read your title report of the property you're buying to see what encumbrances exist.
I also should say, when building plans are reviewed, we include the plat, and if there's an easement there, whether it's public utility easement or any other kind of access easement or something like that, it'll show up on the building permit review as well, so that we're not putting structures where they shouldn't be. Yeah.
And the trail goes through the housing authority, which it never got designated at that time. So this would be a chance to get part of it anyway.
Yes, yeah. I know prior subdivisions have applied to the Historic Review Board for modifications of the easement, and have been approved, because the corridor is a better alignment. In this case, there's no modification proposed. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other questions before we call the applicant to speak?
I wanted to know where that connection between the development and the school walking path would be.
Right. Let's see if I can
And the schools,
zoom in a little bit.
okay.
Just show it.
And I assume the school board had to approve that, or?
Yeah, so the night of the June 9th hearing, the school board approved that. I don't have a copy of the final approval, and that is for the improvements on the school property. The housing authority has to go through HUD in Chicago, and so they have an email that indicates preliminary support for that, but we have a condition of approval that if those dedications cannot be realized, then at a minimum, the applicant's responsible for providing the maximum right-of-way and improvement that they can on their property, but all indications seem to show that they will be able to get the dedications required for the full section. And
Commissioner Mum,
yeah.
there's also a pedestrian connection.
Yeah,
is that what you're referring to as
I
well?
saw
A little bit
that.
north of there?
yeah.
So
And
there would-
that's further
Yeah,
up.
right there.
Right, yeah. So actually, they'll be able to get to the school either way.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah.
We've had on 2 occasions when I've served on this body, we've had
Yes.
we had neighbors coming in protesting the those kinds of connections because they get what they felt was bad behavior, and
Yeah.
actually they were granted one of them. The neighbors came back and took it back and
Closed,
wanted
yeah.
them open at a later date. And it concerns me that if we approve this, then we've got to have a mechanism of keeping it open. And I think that connection is important to people, children that are there, to gain that access. But how do we guarantee that we won't have people complaining about student behavior and requests coming before the commission and close down that access, because the city commission's done that before.
Well, I think over the last year, there's been a more formalized process with respect to requesting closure, which perhaps John might be able to talk to. Yeah.
Well, we have had a neighborhood recently request a closure, and we met with that neighborhood, talked through some improvements. We actually made some improvements. I think a lot of it has to do with the design of those alleyways or those right of ways. So, is there adequate street lighting? Are the fences too tall?
Right.
Is the landscaping too obtrusive? Those are the kind of things. Are they too long? We've had some of those where they've been really long, so there's been hiding areas behind them. This one seems like a relatively short one. We have a lot like this in town, and we never have complaints about those. How do we assure it? I don't know.
Well, no, I don't think. I really didn't mean you could assure against.
How can I tell the commission what not to do?
But I'm sure there's planting requirements or,
Yeah,
the
it's-
scale of the shrubbery or something that's taken into consideration.
There are. On either side of that path, there is a evergreen hedge requirement, but and then on the private property on either side of it, an owner can still erect a 6 foot or a 3.5 foot fence, depending on where the setback is on their property. So, the city can have a maximum height with respect to shrubbery and plantings, and we like to keep eyes on
Right.
what is
Right,
public.
Right.
But there's nothing that we can say with respect to limiting fence height adjacent to that. So,
Right.
yeah.
Any other commissioner questions?
I had one. On condition of approval 31 about the proposed off-site improvements to promote drainage, can you talk about where those are on the?
Sorry. One moment. I have to go to the aerial photo here and zoom out. Actually, one moment. Okay, so
Because they added these in addition.
right, these are really above and beyond what the staff and the city code requires. Here's the property. Here is the Ames Swan intersection over here.
Down south one.
Sorry, yeah, right here. Over there. It's about 21 feet wide of pavement, I think, and then it's developed to a county standard. It was annexed into the city later on. You've got roadside ditches and swales there, and testimony was that it's used as an informal school bus waiting area, which occurs up and down Swan Avenue and other places throughout the city where parents pick up their kids or wait for their kids to get off the school bus various times a day, which is really an issue outside of the development review traffic impacts. The The traffic counts were done by the applicant at that interchange based on monitoring, and it found to be so low that they didn't warrant additional study with respect to turning movements or safety, or any offsite improvements were not warranted there. That being said, the applicant and the developer heard what people had to say with respect to the drainage and the parking there, and offered a solution, which they can do. The engineering department has not had a chance to review what that would look like yet. It would be within the existing right-of-way. We wrote the condition of approval flexibly enough to assure that the city engineer would have purview over that paving and drainage improvement proposed by the applicant in the event that it happens. Normally, a local right-of-way has, if it was built to a full city standard, has about 32 feet of road pavement in it, which allows for 2 travel lanes and 2 parking lanes. A parking lane on either side, that's paved and meets city standard. We want to assure that any paving that is proposed does not exacerbate a drainage problem or any kind of structural problem. It would need to be engineered.
I got one question on that map. The pink is our urban growth boundary, is it?
And the city limit coincide in this situation.
And I see it looks like the property lines actually go beyond the city limits. Is that correct? I see those black lines on the other side.
Well,
that's
this is probably a little bit of
Okay,
photo error.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's all I wanted to. That's all I wanted to establish. That's fine.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Any other questions?
Not now.
Applicant wish to come forward and speak?
Before we do the applicant, I want to read the public hearing piece.
Yes.
Sorry.
Is he part of the public hearing?
The
applicant?
Staff. The applicant is part of the public
Okay.
hearing. So, but as you know, this is you're sitting as a quasi-judicial body, which limits some of what you can do, and there are certain restrictions in the state statutes and the city code. The first thing is that the Planning Commission voted to approve, and our code, when it comes up to you, it's on the record. No new evidence, just testimony and arguments. They've got to be limited to the issues that are raised before the Planning Commission. The criteria that apply to this application, Pete just went over in his staff report, and all testimony, arguments should be directed toward those or other criteria that you believe apply. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to let the commission know, let the commission respond to it, will preclude your ability to raise that issue at the Land Use Board of Appeals, and failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city and others to respond to the issue will preclude an action for damages in circuit court. And finally, because you are sitting in a quasi-judicial body, we need to talk about bias, conflict of interest, and ex parte contacts. And this is an opportunity for you to declare if you've had any ex parte contacts have a bias or conflict of interest. None. Any challenges from the audience? Seeing none.
I think the people that had comments at the last meeting, I think, got almost everything onto the record, and I surely have received no emails from the public, so I've had no contacts.
Good. No challenges? You can open the public hearing.
Well, I always thought I opened the public hearing after the applicant. Is that not right?
The applicant is considered part of the public. City staff.
Okay, I opened the public hearing, but we'll first take comments from the applicant if they wish to make any.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission members. My name is Rick Givens. I'm a planning consultant working for the applicant. To my right is Bruce Goldson of Theta Engineering, the project engineer. I'm going to limit my comments tonight to, I think, the two major issues that were the reasons why we had 3 commissioners not vote in favor of this application.
Okay.
Two commissioners were concerned simply about zoning density. They didn't want to see it precedent set, I think was some of the wording that was used, that, if you change this from R10 to something else, what's to prevent doing it elsewhere? And when we looked at this property, our first thought in looking at it was that there are no development constraints to this property at all. It's well served with services. It adjoins a major public facility in Holcomb Elementary School. It abuts higher density zone property, R3.5 for Oregon City View Manor, that will probably be redeveloped in the future at higher density than it is now. And there's R8 zoning in that development. I forget the name of it, or Pittock Place. You can see it there in the map. So there's a mixed density in this area, and there's a lot of good reasons whenever we're in the urban growth boundary to think about what makes most efficient use of public facilities and services. Because as you all know, you're painfully aware, I believe here recently, of cases where older services cost a lot of money to repair and keep up. So it makes the most sense to, before we expand the urban growth boundary, to look at taking in more population. It makes the most sense from a planning standpoint to look at making the best use of the land that's in the urban growth boundary and maximizing the efficiency of the use of those sewer and water road services. So that's the primary reason why we thought in this case it made perfect sense. Now, it's not a precedent at all, because other areas you may find that there are not a level of services that's capable of handling the increased density. And you may find that there are water resources, wetlands, any number of natural features, steep slopes that would preclude considering a higher density. But in this case, it makes perfect sense. So that's why we had initial pre-app, we talked about R6, and staff thought that was, they were concerned about the issues we might have with the neighborhood, but said that they could support it. And we went to the neighborhood meeting, and we kind of got some feedback that, that was way out of line. And actually, we picked up on that first, and then we dropped to R8 before we went to the pre-app, to the neighborhood meeting. And anyway, we ended up coming up with a mixed application of R10 and R8 is what we filed at a density of 29 units. And subsequent to the first Planning Commission hearing, we kind of got an awful lot of neighborhood resistance at that, and so we looked at what we could do to consolidate back further. So at this point, we're asking for 2 additional lots over what could be obtained under the existing zoning on the property. We think that's reasonable considering the benefits that are offered in conjunction with this development to the surrounding community. Right now, Ames Street is a long, dead-end street that is only accessed from Swan Avenue, and you've already heard testimony or staff comment tonight about how that's a narrow, substandard situation. Similarly, Holcomb Elementary School only has one way in and out of it. If there were a fire or other situation there, difficult to access, this development would provide for connectivity, which is encouraged by the city's transportation plan, and also would provide for additional service to the school. Right now, all of the kids in that neighborhood, because of there being no direct connection, have to be bused to the elementary school, which adds to bus traffic and congestion down at Ames Street at the intersection with Swan. We'll be providing a pedestrian path to the school, as you can see, and also are agreeing with the school district to pave the pathway all the way over to, you can see how it connects over to the existing pavement. So that's an off-site expense the developer has agreed to. Beyond that, we've agreed to relocate the gate and do the improvements there at the intersection, provide them, a good way into the school. And there's been discussion about, I don't know if I get my mouse to work here. Where's it at? There we go. You never understand why I see it on here and I don't see it up there. There we go. Okay. School bus is Q right here. And we have agreed with the district that if there's a partition already approved that's apparently going forward, that will provide sidewalk there, but should that development not go forward, we would agree to provide for about 50 feet of sidewalk pavement along there to help the school district out. So we think that it's a minimal increase in density. None of the lots proposed in the development are smaller than what would be allowed in an R10 development. The density is 2 lots more, but in an R10 development, you can go down to 8,000 square foot lots as long as your average maintains 10,000 square feet. We have no lots less than 8,000 square feet. Our average lot size of the entire development is 9,500 square feet. So we're only talking about an additional area of about a double-car garage, just if you look at it per lot. The homes that will be built in there will be very much compatible and similar to those found in the surrounding area, so there will be no negative impact. So for all those reasons, we think this makes perfect sense from a land use standpoint. The other major concern, and figure out how to get the aerial photograph back up here, but expressed by the owner of this property. Come on, let's see, where did it go to? Pointer. The owner of this property right here, off-site, presented some photographs at the public hearing that showed significant erosion and silting going on in the ditch between the greenhouse property and their property. And one commissioner, that was the only concern she had, and that was why she did not vote for the development, was because she was concerned that she said wasn't adequately addressed to her satisfaction. But I'm going to let Bruce Golson talk about storm drainage just a little bit more.
For the record, my name is Bruce Golson. Mayor, Commissioners, I'm the civil engineer that's been working on this plan, and I reviewed the previous stormwater report for the subdivision to the north, which talked about this development and included in the computations for sizing and so forth to in anticipation that this would develop. It also has ditch inlets and receiving things on Ames that the water currently from this site drains into that system in the undeveloped situation. We're proposing a stormwater pond right there at the corner. I think it's a wild one. Right there to accommodate and meet the city standards for development of the stormwater system. The drainage basin is historically all gone down and comes through this property somewhere. The nursery has kind of changed that over time, and there's a drainage way on Forsyth Road that collects all this area, and historically it's always went that way some way or another. And there's kind of 2 subbasins in this area. One is the subdivision to the north and our subdivision, and a little bit of the property here, and it's kind of cut off right here. And then the other one is the school, and it continues east clear over to another older subdivision, which has at least 2 outfalls that were done not to the current standards. So all that water drains down and does not come onto the subject property, but is collected in a ditch along the edge here and runs down, runs around the corner, and comes into there. A lot of the storm water, and I was out there during a couple of storm events, was quite dirty, and those fields are actively cultivated, and oftentimes during the year they're bare. And so a lot of sediment comes along with that. And all that's uncontrolled. The school district, to my knowledge, has a little bit of swale there, but no real detention, so that's a large contributor. That subdivision to the east is also contributing. That doesn't meet the current standards. The subdivision to the north there that we're tying into is the current standard. It still is the current standard, and we'll be doing it to our standard. So the city's agreed with my findings and actually feels that our approach will meet or exceed the city requirements.
And I think it's important to note that it shouldn't exacerbate the problems that are existing to the north. You know, those are things that probably need some maintenance in terms of the ditch and those kinds of things, but because of it being developed to city standards, we won't be increasing the rate of runoff, and so it shouldn't exacerbate what's going on there at all. So that's pretty much it. I think we've done a pretty good job of tying together this application and dealing with all of the requirements of the code. We've matched the city's transportation plan in terms of future street planning and connectivity. I'd ask your support for the project.
I want to add one thing. I'm also the engineer for the little partition there on School Lane, and they are doing a sidewalk there. The plans are being reviewed right now. We're going to, it's about 150 feet of sidewalk from the school property back towards Hookham. So that will be built prior to this subdivision occurring.
Do you have any questions of us?
Not at this time.
I do. It is a drainage under the ditch, and I'll just kind of explore it a little bit with you. If you told me it was a detention pond instead of a it was a retention pond instead of a detention pond, I'd feel a little bit better, because you were saying that there's no additional flow. I presume, though, that water does drain off this property now into that ditch. There's some runoff?
It does. The property does drain to the north through the subdivision to the north and into that ditch. It does.
When you say that you won't contribute any, and yet you got a detention pond that you're putting in, that, and the flow of it can go into the other detention pond, if I heard that correctly.
That's correct.
How would you say that there's no additional flow?
Well, it only rains so much. The rain's not going to change. So, per the city code, we develop the calculations to show that it goes out at the pre-developed rate for various storm events, starting at the 2-year event. So that's how that's controlled.
All right, I think that's basically what I wanted to hear, because flow, some runoff probably occurred from this area into the ditch anyway during heavy rainfalls. And what you're saying is the design of these detention ponds are such that it won't increase that flow.
Right. It comes out. It's supposed to come out at the pre-developed rates.
Okay. I think that's my only question. This is I always go by my cheat sheet up there, and so I see the public hearing comes after. Public comment occurs after that, but I've already opened the public hearing. Yeah. And now we'll open it to any other discussion before we get. No. Okay. No. All right. We'll go ahead and start down our list as soon as I get on the floor, and 2 people will call up, and please speak in the order in which I give your names. Rick Givens, and I'll try this, Leroy Stoudemire.
Rick was.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, of course you were. Leroy Stoudemire and Stoudemire, and Debbie Fuller.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mayor. I'm Debbie Fuller. I was here at the last...
Actually, you're right. Excuse me. Never mind.
Okay. I was here at the last City Commission meeting, and I just have a few things to say after being at the Planning Commission meeting. Paul Espy, who voted against this proposal, made a really good point. If the R8 wasn't already meeting the criteria for R8, why do we give them conditions to make it R8? And he said we could just give any developer conditions and they can make it whatever zone they want. We're still opposed to the R8. We want R10. There's a lot of larger pieces of property. I live on almost 2 acres. Another issue I'd like to mention is we believe there's no compelling reason to have R8. I mean, 2 houses is 2 houses, but it still changes the zone to R8 and doesn't keep it R10. We also feel that it's going to lower the values of our homes by changing them to R8 rather than R10. Most of us that moved to the area wanted at least R10 lots, and that's why many of my neighbors moved there. And I think last time I gave you a petition telling exactly that. And nothing personal against Rick Givens, but I think he has a lot of rhetoric and talks a lot about reports and studies being done, but it doesn't prove anything. What's reality is reality. And so I would like to show you a few photos of the drainage issue.
They submitted before.
And they have been submitted before.
Okay.
Are they in the record? Because we would already have them in our packet, right?
Yeah,
Right, but
she
I would
pointed
like
to
for you to
it.
see them
Yeah.
tonight, if you don't mind. I just need help from
If our
From Nancy.
staff sees that
From
they're in the
somebody that-
report, they'll give us a
Can you
warning.
get- Oh, wait a minute. Maybe that's it. Okay. So I just need to be able to. Yeah. So these. Oh, it isn't. Okay.
My presentation. Oh. Houston, we have a problem.
It's frozen.
Cut into my time.
Yeah, it's frozen.
Want to pause the time clock?
Can we
Why
go-
don't we just-
It's off.
Yeah.
She hasn't started it yet.
So why don't we just go to the next guy if we're...
Well, I was just going to make I did get an email from a fellow neighbor that lives right next door to me, and I'm actually the house that is kind of at an angle, the big house there, and the neighbor to the west has sent me an email. He wanted me to read it if he wouldn't be able to attend, if I can do that.
Do you want to fix the technical problem? Or just move that?
I think we should move along.
Yeah.
I mean, I can
We generally
do
have
this.
these
Bill,
things
can we have an
submitted in
email from
advance
this
in
guy?
order to get them up, so.
Was it in the record?
Was it in the record?
What's that?
The email?
This is
His email.
providing testimony. As long as there's not new evidence within the email, it's...
It's an
you know,
email
you-
to me, and he was going to try to be here tonight, but he couldn't.
Mhm.
Is it okay to read it then?
It is.
Is there new evidence in it, or is it just an argument about...
It's just an argument about the drainage.
Okay.
Okay. To whom it may concern, I am Jerry Bach at 14456 Ames, Oregon City. 24 years ago, I acquired the property at this address. It had no home on it. In 2002, I completed my home. I had installed 3 sump pump holes to prepare for the water drainage problem this area has had for years. This area could not be built on. It absorbs very little water. Our water table is maybe 20 feet on any given day. With a good rain, we can saturate our lawn and our pump will pump water. This happens even though I raised my acre with 100 yards of dirt to try to get above the onslaught of water that occurs regularly. I have since found out that my acre has once been a small lake bottom. It doesn't surprise me that the neighbors are having water problems with the developments diverting water to the north. Thank you, Jerry Bach.
I I'll go to our attorney here.
Yeah, it sounded like
Yeah.
a fair bit of new evidence about what these guys' conditions are. So I'm going to ask that the commission disregard
Okay.
the evidence in there. But
Yeah.
I think the idea that there are problems with drainage in the area is in the
It's
record.
been indicated before, yeah.
Okay. So am I up on my time for the pictures?
Because of the delay, the answer I will say is no. If we can bring the pictures up.
The computer's frozen, it has to be shut down.
Maybe while
We
the
should
computer
go
is
on.
being...
Well, no, I was thinking of going to our report here. I presume the pictures are on the report.
Well, that's what I
Yeah.
have your pictures up.
I just wanted to, because I know that there's a couple of you that were really curious about the drainage, and I just wanted to kind of refresh your mind on really why one of the major problems is the water going to the north. And the home,
They're
Are those the pictures?
These are I think these are the pictures. They're in
Well,
the.
which one is it in?
Which document?
This is in the Planning Commission meeting.
Recommendation?
Yeah.
Planning Commission recommendation?
and
No,
so,
it was in their.
PC packet,
Yes.
PC pack.
6914.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And it was on page 22.
Okay, thank you. Don't find that. Okay, and which one was it? The Planning Commission recommendation? You say the packet?
PC
Packet.
Packet
Yeah.
6.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'll find it.
What page, Betty?
I have it on
21 is where it starts. And
Okay.
21?
there's the first picture, and then there's another one at 22.
Are
That's the
these the
ditch.
pictures that you took? You probably don't know.
well, I can't see them, but it should show the muddy water coming
Yeah.
down the ditch.
Yeah.
It should show erosion on the Patton's property.
Yeah.
And Shirley Patton is here to testify about that.
Okay.
So it's those pictures right there.
Thank you.
Okay, was there anything else then?
No, other than my pictures, I just
Yeah.
wanted to
Thank you.
Yeah.
make sure you saw those.
Yep.
Mr. Studmeyer.
Yeah, I want to address the water problem just a little bit. You know, I'm concerned about the amount of streets and driveway approaches and roof systems that are going to be draining into there where that water cannot soak into the ground. And that ditch going, when it comes around and goes to the north where this water dumps out, in a hard rain, it's already over capacity. It's washing out those people's property and everything. And you put that much more water down there, it's going to come up over the top of that ditch and down across their property. That ditch is no way in the world going to hold that much more water when it comes down through there.
Thank you.
That's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. I'll call Shirley Patton, Bob LaSalle, please.
Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Shirley Patton. I live on Forsyth Road. My property butts up against Sunnybrook Estates subdivision, north of it, west of Sears Farms. Our property runs all along the edge of that ditch that runs forward to Forsyth Road.
And that's where the current subdivision already is?
Right, the
Okay.
Sunnybrook, yeah, the current subdivision. We've lived there 26 years. We had a lot of history with that ditch before Sunnybrook was built. Of course, there's always water problems. We are kind of the funnel for everybody behind us and beside us. But we never had any water problems in front other than the ditch in front, which hopefully you have those pictures there of the horrible erosion of the white fence about ready to fall over and eroding clear on the other side of the fence line. When that subdivision, Sunnybrook, was built and all that pavement was laid, we had so much water running onto our property when it was raining, so much water running forward that never came to the area of our house before. Our basement flooded 3 times because of all that water. So we had to dig a ditch across the middle of the pasture out back to stop that water from coming to the house. The ditch runs so fast and so high when it's raining hard and the ground is water soaked and it's not going into the ground very much anymore. Everything is going into that ditch. It runs so high, it runs to the edge. At one point, it started running over the edge of the ditch into our pasture, and we had to sandbag that area of the ditch not once but twice to stop it. And then we, later on, during the summer, we had about 5 dump loads of dirt dumped out there to try to stop that from ever happening again. Everybody gets their dump their water. I mean, what is 3 times the amount of houses going to do? 3 times the amount of houses after that first subdivision was built. How much more water is that going to add to us? Why do I realize we're in the flow of the water coming that direction, but it came in a different manner before that subdivision was built, and we didn't have water problems up front. And now there's going to be more built, and nobody seems to care. We are the ones that have, my husband and I, we have to deal with it. I mean, when's somebody going to care and try to put a stop to this or have somebody do something about it? Why do we have to deal with this issue? This isn't our problem. I mean, everybody sits there and says, well, it shouldn't, and studies say, well, I'm living proof. It is causing a problem for us. It's happening to us. You know, they don't say it's not going to happen because they can't say that. It is happening to us. And they don't care. They just want to build their houses. They want to better their bottom line. They want to, no one has talked to us about it. No one has even, they don't even address the issue. I mean, how much more water can we take? Something has to be done. I realize the water flow comes that direction. But what is this next subdivision going to do to us when the first one already added so much more that that ditch is running at full capacity during the winter when it's raining hard and the water's got nowhere else to go but into that ditch? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Bob LaSalle. I live in Oregon City, and I'll just pick up on what she was just talking about. They've told us that the present drainage from the property that they're going to develop is not going to impact any more than is already there. I find it hard to believe that that open area now that is mostly grassland and the water soaks into it is all going to be covered with asphalt, homes, sidewalks, and that runoff then will go into one retention pond. When it gets full, it'll go into the second retention pond, which will already be full, and then all of it will go into that drainage ditch. So I can't picture how that development won't affect the drainage problem there. I want you to know that my comments here are as the Park Place Neighborhood Association chair, not individually, but I'm representing the citizens there. At the last Planning Commission meeting, the vote was 4-3, and that's usually not the case with the Planning Commission. Some of the statements were that it was clearly in the next neighborhood past the hearing of ours was from R8 to R6, and the statements made by the commissioners was it was clearly an R8 neighborhood, not R6. The economic justification isn't enough to justify the change. They don't feel comfortable with this pocket among R8. Well, this development would be an R8 pocket surrounded by R10. Now, of course, the housing development at R3.5 is adjacent. One corner of it is adjacent, but that's kind of comparing apples and oranges, really. Another statement, no compelling reason other than economic, and a statement the residents look to us to give them protection. They're looking to you to give them protection also. Another commissioner said if this doesn't pass, it will become R8 down the road eventually, and that was his reason for voting yes. Well, who's to say it's going to be changed, stay or changed to a lower zoning. Nobody can say that. The present builder might, if it stays R10, go ahead and build all R10 there. So I don't think that's a very valid reason. During the 2 planning commission on 1 city commission meeting, only 1 citizen has testified in approval of this development. Just 1 person out of all the testimonies taken place. I mentioned before that during the planning commission meetings that I don't feel comfortable with some of the traffic studies. And a good example is a traffic study that I saw last night at the Transportation Advisory Committee that was made for the speeds on Holcomb Boulevard. And there was one of those flashing speed signs there to monitor Holcomb Boulevard. However, it's at Steve's Market. So you're approaching it from 40 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour.
You're now directing kind of off of our topic, though.
Well, I was referring though, to
but
traffic
your
studies.
Your time is also
okay. Thank you.
Close. Thank you.
Just a neighborhood chair.
Does he get more time?
5 minutes.
Well, did he get the 5 minutes?
Oh, no, he didn't.
If you
he
wanted
didn't
to,
announce
you gotta,
that at the beginning, though, so I didn't.
He's speaking as a chair. He gets a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was referring to that in regard to traffic studies, how they can be so far off, because people coming down Holcomb at 50 miles an hour have to slow way down to pull into Steve's Market. They have to slow way down to stop to drop their mail off at the post office box there. They come out of Steve's Market at a much slower rate. So traffic studies are great when they're accurate, but I don't believe that the traffic studies for this development are really very correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the floor, Laura Hogan and Barbara Rinkin.
My name's Laura Hogan. I'm a resident of the Stables Place Sunnybrook Phase 1 development. I'm staunchly R10, no R8 in this division. In my testimony to the Planning Commission, I provided aerial maps of the current zoning for this area. This area is predominantly R10. There is no compelling reason to change it to R8 to match local neighborhood areas, despite what some people have said. What I don't understand is the compelling reason to change it to R8. I've yet to hear an argument that makes me, as a citizen, sit back and say, yes, R8 makes sense here. I'm still waiting for that. I would ask the Planning Commission and the City Commission to please explain to all of us citizens that are against this R8 to tell us the reasoning for going to the R8, because we're not understanding that. All we're seeing is that someone with big money is coming and asking and is giving a rubber stamp yes. So we want clarification, if you vote for R8, why that is being done. We also want to make sure that if R8 is upheld in this proposal, that the conditions that have already been placed are not only held, but that the ICON is held accountable to them. They are not held accountable for taking over Sunnybrook Division 1's street tree planting guide. All the street trees are mixed match. They don't match the original plan. There's been no accountability for that. That is in my original testimony with a layout showing what's not matching the original plan. One of the conditions that was not mentioned by the city planner or the city staff was that if the R8 is provided, the offsets still need to match the R10 offset from the street, so that visually everything looks the same and there's still adequate parking to keep people off the street. We as a neighborhood have really spoken up and forcefully brought forward our reasons for why we think this should stay R10. We hope that you hear us. We hope that if you decide against our reasoning, that the conditions that have been placed on Icon for this development are held strongly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Barbara Rankin. I live in Oregon City in the Park Place neighborhood, and I am vice chair of the PPNA, and I sit on the CIC. In November of 2013, we learned of the Ames Street project and request to rezone from R10 to R8 and R6 at the PPNA Steering Committee meeting. The meeting was well attended by the citizens, by representatives of the developer and the developer, as well as the PTA president. I've been attending additional Planning Commission meetings, City Commission meetings, and all PPNA meetings. It is now 6 months later. The people of the Ames Street neighborhood and Park Place neighborhood have given testimony regarding their initial objection to rezoning for quality of life reasons. They also have made requests, presented photos, and presented questions regarding drainage issues and traffic issues that will impact the entire Park Place neighborhood and all traffic that uses Holcomb and/or Forsyth. They have brought photos, facts, and data relating to why there are needs that need to be addressed with this project, some of which go back many years. These concerns are far beyond quality of life, which some people is not reason enough. Yet the city staff and Planning Commission has managed to move this flawed project forward with diluted facts and studies, done only after requested, one as recently as May 19th, when we had 1/4 inch of rainfall, if that much. So for the record, the developer has checked off his list studies on drainage and traffic. But few care what time it was made, when the studies were done, or have taken seriously the photos and data the neighbors in this area have brought forward as visual proof of their issues. I don't live on Ames, nor do you, but I do live in the Park Place neighborhood and in Oregon City. Just imagine if this was happening on your street. We have a recently annexed property behind us, behind our home. It too is on the Barlow Trail. It too will have to address drainage and traffic. It is zoned R10. We will want it to be that way for quality of life, where traffic, drainage, and a country atmosphere at the end of the current urban renewal, urban growth boundary. The facts show that this project needs to be further studied regardless of zoning issues. If the traffic and drainage issues the current residents are experiencing now are not addressed, it would be wrong to accept any further development in this area at all before studies and corrections are addressed and corrected. Please understand I am not opposed to development. I favor development when done correctly, because development, when done correctly, benefits the city, the citizens, the county, and the state. I think Oregon City is going to have a difficult time in the future getting citizens to approve annexations if something isn't done to prove that the city is listening to the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have two more here, Michael Shaw and Tom O'Brien. Go ahead, Tom, while he's getting set up.
I'm Tom O'Brien. I'm a resident of Oregon City. I had not intended to comment on this issue this evening. However, I just want to confirm in one instance what I thought I heard said by staff regarding the Barlow Trail area. Did I understand correctly that that area cannot be built upon, however, it can be fenced off?
I'm getting a nod.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. There were two other comments made that I wanted to comment on, one by City Attorney Cablesman, when he spoke about title companies, realtors, etc. I, over the years, have purchased 6 different homes, and in one of those instances, the third home I purchased, I went through all the procedures, thought I was in good shape. The title company did its search, charged me for that search. 2 years later, I was able to determine that my neighbor had confiscated a portion of my land, fenced it off, and built a garden. Not all realtors, not all title companies are professionals. I know that I have disturbed a number of people in title companies since that third purchase because I now read every word in every document that I am asked to sign. Speaking on behalf of a former responsibility that I had as a president of a 39-unit homeowners association, the average purchaser of a property in any development these days does not read conditions and restrictions, declarations of intent, any of that sort of thing. It's all just so much paperwork, they don't want to deal with it, and they don't read it. And so I think strong requirements need to be placed on those particular parcels so that they are aware of what their restrictions are and need to abide by it. Once that's fenced off, I don't see a rational ability on the part of the city to enforce. You do not know what goes on behind somebody's fence. The third issue was regarding sidewalks. A statement was made that we've never had a problem here in the city with walkways. In our particular neighborhood, I can go back and show you minutes where we had a very vocal individual resident who was upset with the city because the city's shrubs that they put in along the walkway were invading under his fence and destroying his own vegetation. So maybe the individual who made that statement was not aware that we've had problems, but I am aware, and I can show you the actual record of that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
See if we can get his up. Are these already on the record?
I don't have any photos, I guess.
So, but the question would be still, are those photos already on the record?
Yes, I'll try to do it. But I was going to talk about the drainage system and the problems that
I don't think you submitted them.
I have. This is kind of tough to do, but that's one of the photos. I have a French drain across.
Excuse me,
I'm going to have to
Mr.
stop.
Mr.
Is
Shaw?
this on the record? Do we
Mr.
already
Shaw.
have this?
What's that?
Is this already on the record?
Excuse
Do
me,
we
my
have
name
it?
is Michael Shaw.
No, that's not the question. Are these pictures, do we have them on the record already?
Have they been submitted to the city before this evening?
Get my name before, right.
You have submitted them before?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
These photos haven't been on.
Are we having
Have they been before the planning commission meeting?
Excuse me?
Have your pictures been before the planning commission?
No, they haven't.
Then we can't see
We
them.
can't see them.
Okay.
No new evidence.
But you can speak to the issue.
Okay. I was just going to show, on my house, I have a French drain in the backyard, comes down between two houses to the front and drains into the street. And what I'm getting at is I have two sump pumps. My neighbor has two sump pumps. The neighbor across the street has two sump pumps. And the neighbor on the other side got tired of hearing his sump pumps, so we dug a hole underneath his house and drained it to the ditch. So there's been a problem with water, and the builder of all the houses knows there's a problem with the water because he did our houses that way. That's ICON. Okay. And then probably 140 feet from my house is going to be across the street, the property, and there's going to be the drains there. Well, I started looking around trying to figure out the drainage problems and where the water was going. Well, I had so much water in my yard still. I've killed 2 trees trying to get them to grow too much water. My flowers were rotting and dying because too much water. I looked at across the street, the property they're going to build on, and I remember last, I think it was probably about last spring, put a whole bunch of drains and drained them to a catch basin that's at the foot of his property. Well, he's draining this property, so the owner of that property knew there was a drainage problem in his horse stables, and so that's my problem. Everybody's kind of walking around it. No, we don't have a drainage problem. There is a drainage problem. I don't think they shouldn't build houses there. They just need to address the drainage problem first. That's what they need to do for everybody else. And that's about it. That's my problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For your time.
See no other people signed up for the public hearing, I'm going to go ahead and close it.
Nope, the applicant gets the opportunity
Well,
for.
yeah, okay. The applicant then
Yeah.
can go ahead and rebut the testimony.
For the record, Rick Givens again. Well, I think it's confirmed that the issues are zoning and storm drainage. Zoning issues, again, we're talking about 2 lots at this point. It's not a significant difference in terms of how the perception of that neighborhood is going to be. There's no difference in the types of homes, no difference in we aren't building any lots that are smaller than what's allowed in an R10 area. We're just asking for 2 additional lots because we have some additional expenses. And we're doing a lot of off-site work here. And so this helps recover those costs. Also, we think, for the reasons we made before, that we're making more efficient use of valuable urban land by making reasonable urban densities that aren't out of character with the neighborhood. The fact that we are next to R3.5 zoning, the fact that there is R8 zoning in the area, that goes to, what the character of the neighborhood is. Certainly, I understand why people who buy larger homes are concerned what goes in around them, but these homes are going to be very much the same as what they're talking about. The lot frontages are the same, so we can put in houses where we've agreed to have the same setbacks, and so I see no reason that this is going to degrade the neighborhood in any way. Regarding stormwater, I'm just going to say one thing before I turn it over to Bruce, and that is that, there's a difference between what the problem is and the perception of what the problem is in a lot of cases. People are saying that, well, this development went in and suddenly they had problems. Well, you don't know that that's the reason why they had problems. The major contributor to the drainage in this area is the large fields to the east and south of this property beyond the school. Most of that is wide open tilled land where you get major storms, you get heavy runoff that has a lot of erosion and sediments, and as you silt up ditches, it changes the character of them. But I'm going to let Bruce talk more about that because I don't know enough to be worth anything. I will say one more thing. I guess there was quite a bit of comment about traffic studies and storm drainage studies not being reliable. They're done to standards set forth in the city code. Both the storm drainage plan and the traffic studies are done to the code. They're reviewed by city staff and in this case the traffic study by a professional traffic consultant the city hires to make sure that they're done in accordance with acceptable standards. They've been reviewed and approved as being in conformance with city standards.
I just have a few comments about the stormwater. I know it's a problem. As we urbanize, stormwater is more of a problem. There's no doubt about it. Years past, you could always just dump it onto the neighbor. It went away. Didn't have to worry about it. Rules have changed, and the city's adopted standards to minimize those impacts for the downstream person. This is a natural drainage way. The neighbors to the north, unfortunately, live in a natural drainage way. I mean, they do. That's kind of the downstream focal point of this drainage basin. Unfortunately, they do. The soils are very poor out there. I agree that the groundwater is high in the winter. On the little partition that I'm working on to the east there, I find that it's extremely high. And it'll be a challenge for this development to deal with the high groundwater in that facility. It will be. But we're meeting the city standards. My preliminary report was reviewed by several members of the staff. I think it's in the packet. I'm not sure of that, but I think it is. On how we propose to meet or exceed the code. And so we feel that we've achieved the best of our ability to minimize the impacts of storm drainage in the area.
Anything else? We still have some time.
I guess just a comment or two about the Barlow Trail. That was some testimony on that. We fully intend to disclose to all the purchasers what they are getting into when they buy the lot. The fact that those lots can't have buildings within that easement. Obviously, future purchasers, as when you buy any property, had better look at their paperwork and make sure they understand what it is you're buying. But even if somebody were to put a garden shed there or something like that, the city would be well within the rights to come and ask them to move it if they built it there, because it would be in an established easement. Let me see if there's any other comments here.
I think with traffic reports as well, those are reviewed by the city traffic engineer, and they meet the requirements of the development, and I don't find fault with their approach. I think that they look at the intersections that need looking at, and their analysis is based on actual facts. I don't see that there's a reason to believe that they're in error.
I would point you, regarding the storm drainage, point you in the direction of some photographs that were introduced to the Planning Commission record. The fact that after a fairly heavy rain on May 18th, the pond in the existing Sunnybrook development was nowhere near full. There was lots of freeboard. The ditches that they're talking about, there's a significant amount of runoff that comes off the greenhouse property into the ditches. This is the tilled land of the Ceres farm that drains. That's where the majority of the water that comes down that ditch comes.
I think those are different.
Those are in the record.
Yeah, these are in the record.
Yeah, they're in there.
And, the fact that the ditch is dry shortly after the rainstorm. So I don't doubt that they have problems during heavy rains. I'm not going to say they don't. I'm just going to say that, as Bruce testified, we're designing things to conform to city standards that are designed to minimize, and the amount of rate of runoff is going to be about the same as it was. The rate of runoff will be the same as it was prior to development during a 2-year storm event.
So I have a question for the applicant.
Go right ahead.
So explain to me why you've chosen to go to an R8 from an R10.
Well, as I said, I think there are a lot of reasons. First of all, I'm going to give my own personal opinion. I've been a planning consultant. I have a master's degree in urban planning. And I give you my own personal opinion that I think is supported by a lot of planners, and that is that R10 zoning, frankly, is a very inefficient land use for urban areas. A lot of people may disagree with that, neighbors may disagree with that, but that's my own personal opinion. I've seen, the city's code is written such that when property is annexed to the city, it comes in at R10, even though R10, R8, and R6 are the zones that implement the comprehensive plan designation. Any of those 3 zones is an appropriate zone, given certain conditions. Conditions you look at when you're a planner are, well, what's reasonable given the facilities, the character of the land, and the character of the neighborhood. In this instance, you've got mixed zoning. You're next to a major community facility in the school that not only provides school service but also provides open space services. There's a play area down there that kids can play in. They're going to be putting in a jogging path around that, and when we get done with this development, people from that neighborhood will be able to walk through the pedestrian path over and use that facility where they can't now. So it improves the quality of life in their neighborhood. And it makes more efficient use of the facilities. I mean, whether we do this at R10 or R8, we're going to have the same amount of street, same amount of paving, roughly the same amount of storm sewer, except we're looking at 2 more houses, storm runoff, I should say. And it just makes better sense in terms of the future maintenance requirements for the infrastructure. costs money to maintain, to put in and to maintain those infrastructures. And doing it at very low density doesn't make a lot of sense these days. Trying to keep the air growth boundary compact and as far as what's out there and what's available in terms of yard area and those kinds of things. Like I said, our average lot size is 9,500 square feet versus 10,000. It's not a significant difference.
So with the R8 and the R10, you're still gonna do the path to the school. You're still gonna do whichever R8 or R10. Everything is gonna still stay the same.
Well,
is that-
our application is for this specific plan.
Yes.
And if it were denied, we'd have to consider whether or not it makes sense to reapply as an R10.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Not of them.
Thank you very much.
It's a general
go ahead.
question, actually. It's not. The question is regarding the drainage and the photos. I'm not convinced we're looking at the same photos that people are talking about, because if we are, I don't understand it. These are the only pictures that I see in the record.
Oh, there are more.
Which is the ones that you had.
Yeah.
And to me, that doesn't quite describe what people are saying. So I want to make sure I'm looking at
The correct pictures.
If you look at, go back to the documents and new items and
Yeah.
entered at PC hearing, there's actually
Okay.
a series of photos further down in
staff
that
report
as well.
PC hearing. Okay.
Not the staff report. but
Not the staff report.
Well, that's the only one that said
6/9/14.
Okay, if you get back to the documents, new items entered at PC hearing there.
Okay.
And if you go down a few pages, you'll get to some pictures.
Okay.
I have enough trouble making mine work. There you go.
Okay.
I'd like to add, if I could, in this one photo here, you can see, and I think you have that on your...
Yeah.
This is new items.
You can see that the flow is fairly low at the time of the photo, but the vegetation line is up above that, so at the majority of the time, I would think, because there's no vegetation there, it is stripped it away, so it's going to be, a foot deeper or so. It's long periods of time there, because and those reflect in some of those other photos, I think, that you have.
Any other questions of us?
I appreciate that clarification, because it does indicate that the water flows can be substantially greater than what we're seeing in these pictures. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Comments or questions of staff at this point? I'm closing the public hearing, Emily. I've got one. Well, I actually got more than one, but one.
I was
that-
gonna say,
that
I've got a
centers-
few myself.
that centers on the point has been made that the detention pond is not full during these events. Does that guarantee that the outflow from the detention pond is less than it would be if there was no development at the site? That is, no development situation, there water could be flowing into the ditch, right? And the question is,
That's
does the
correct.
presence of the detention pond, the fact that it's not full, guarantee that the outflow of the detention pond would be less than there would be from contribution of that site to the ditch pre-development? Guarantees you're holding back some water, but does it indicate you're holding back the amount of water that would have not normally gone into the system?
The way they're designed is the intent of the design is for them to slowly release water at a rate not to exceed what was had the land been vacant. Okay. Now in this case, the land that was vacant didn't go in at one spot. It went kind of across the entire frontage of that ditch. But the design of the pond is such that you collect all that water. It's intended to hold that water, and the there's an orifice in that structure that lets that water out at a rate much less than what a storm would. That's why they fill up and they take a while to decrease. What we hold back is a 25-year storm event. So that's a very large storm. And there's provisions for overflow if the storm were bigger, and then that would challenge the ditch, just like if there was nothing there. So that's how they're designed to work. Does that answer your question?
It answers my question.
So it lets the flow out over a much longer duration.
Yeah.
So you have an orifice that controls the rate it leaves the pond. But because it does that then over a much longer period of time, but it avoids that flash right away.
Yeah, and I understand that. But the question was at a pre-development point, and he's indicating that that's the intent of the plan. This area in particular is a concern to me because, when we had discussions about the expansion of the urban growth boundary, there were property owners that are outside the urban growth boundary that wanted to be included. One of the big arguments was that we didn't want to have impact on watersheds that basically we weren't in, or we were barely in. The Clackamas River watershed is one of these. This water is going into the Clackamas River watershed, and there's not any retrofit we could do if we're wrong, because it's not in city land. So if there is a contribution of heavier flow into this area, we're not going to be able to do much about it because it's going to be in county land. There's no redesign we're going to be able to do, well, at least without the cooperation of the county, that'll work. This is an area that really concerns me a great deal. The thing is, I don't know that if we're going through if we're not looking for a zone change, they were going ahead with a R10 configuration. The question I'm going to ask is, what would have been the process then? We would see no matter what. That, if it was going in as an R10, it's approved zoning, we wouldn't see that other than through an appeal process. Is that correct?
That is correct. Assuming it didn't need a variance or anything like that.
That's right.
And even then, that would go to the Planning Commission.
And I guess
so essentially, you'd only see it
the
on
fact
appeal.
that there are 2 additional houses there versus what was there before. Would the additional 2 houses have any additional impact on the drainage system? I guess they wouldn't. You probably have about the same amount of street space. I presume that water off of roofs is trying to be directed not directly into the storm system. Is that true? Or do you know?
In this case, I'm not sure, but typically we would be directing that stormwater to the storm systems. We don't have, right now, we don't have provisions for rain gardens, those kind of things. So it would be directed to the storm drainage system.
Because I was encouraged to disconnect from the storm drains and let it flow onto my property, but we don't have those provisions.
We will allow disconnect rain drains, so yes, we will allow for that.
But it's not required.
Right.
I have a question.
Good. So does she. So does
Yeah,
we all have questions.
I think we all have questions.
Do we have the data on how many sump pumps are in the city and how many are in that area?
No, we don't. That's a good question. I'm not giggling because of that, but that's a big effort, and we don't know that.
Because I don't know anybody where I live that has one. I'm wondering if they're pretty much in that area, if that's where the water problems are. Why is there not a culvert built in somewhere to divert the water or handle that? I'm worried about the larger system.
I think the answer is supplied here. You've got a private ditch.
Yeah.
I think that
You've
if
got
you...
a private ditch outside the city limits.
Yeah, and and that's kind of been the historic waterway for this area. We know we have some pumps around various places in the city. We
have some up by my house.
We often see them kick on as they come out the curb hole sometimes. So you see them around, but I don't know how many we have. They're not ours. They're private. They'd be privately owned.
Right.
It's difficult when you run into these urban development up against the county development where you're utilizing an existing system, and in this case we don't even have the benefit of it being even a county public system where, you know, this is on private property. Essentially someone came in and dug a ditch along the property line. Was it adequately sized to accommodate the flows?
No.
Right. If it was a public system with a public easement and designed to our standards, it'd probably be a different conversation.
Yes.
You know, all we can rely on are the standards that we have in place today, which are better than they were 10 years ago in terms of how you detain water, the water quality treatment associated with that, and how it's metered out. But you still need to release it back into the natural drainage that does eventually drain down to the Clackamas, in this case, where it's located up in Park Place.
But that was the reasoning for my question about the proposed off-site improvements to promote drainage, and that my question was answered by down on
Right.
Ames Street,
Ames
which
and
is
Swan.
way far down from the development. So I'm just concerned about handling the flows through the properties regardless of where they come from. That's all.
I know Commissioner Munn mentioned first. I think I'll go to her at this point.
Okay. Well, drainage is a huge issue for me. I think studies, transportation, and that, I think that will be fine. I just don't know that the request for the R8, in my mind, has really been met. That's what I'm struggling with. The drainage, we got to do something about drainage out there. Tony.
Well, they're designing it to the standards that we have adopted.
Wave your magic wand, make it be good.
I wish I could.
So, you know, it's a very tough one. I do think that we do listen. I have to commend the Planning Commission. They have, I feel, very much listened, and I do think that they care, and I know that we care about what the citizens say. It's just a difference of opinion. But I just don't see that the R8, in my mind, has been made the way to go.
Commissioner Smith.
My main concern is the oh, now I've lost it. Is the drainage. And I wish, I'm extremely sympathetic with all of the people that have testified about the drainage. But I'm trying to match this with all the pictures I'm seeing, and I see one, maybe, that the one that shows the pond, full. But all the pictures that show the ditch are just not what people are saying.
Right.
And that kind of bothers me, because I mean, this sounds like a regular occurrence, one of which that would be fairly easy to take photos of, and the photos just don't match. So I'm kind of trying to weigh the testimony I'm hearing with the pictures I'm seeing. But I'm comfortable with most of the rest of this. I especially in regards to traffic, things like that. I think if there were issues with those, that the school district would be very vocal about. That sounds like
I think so.
Sounds like the developers have gone, out of their way to address some of the issues raised by with the school and even with the drainage to some degree. But I'm still struggling with the drainage issue. I think that is definitely one that I'm concerned about. But I'm just trying to weigh that with the pictures. So.
Just one comment. The applicant the applicants themselves indicated that, in fact, a lot more water was in that drainage ditch than those indicated. They indicated the vegetation level, and I presume that there are events that could occur that can go above that vegetation level without destroying the vegetation, but could top the ditch. Can I get clarification on the vote of the Planning Commission? There were two votes, I believe. One was on the change in zoning, and one was on the conditions of the approval. Is that right?
No, it was packaged as one. I think the discussion was the applicant, you have the opportunity to run what's called a concurrent application. So usually the zone change would come through the Planning Commission to the City Commission. Subdivision would usually be a staff level decision. The applicant has the ability to combine those and run them concurrently. So Commissioner Espy's discussion was, a concern about conditionally approving zone changes, setting trip caps, for example, on a zone change. If you went from residential to commercial, instead of saying yes, you're approved as commercial, you conditionally approve it and say you can only have 400 new trips. Here, the conditions are associated with the subdivision. So they're typical, non-remonstrance agreement, right-of-way dedication, street design, those type of conditions that you would see associated with the subdivision. Based on the request from R10 to R8 to add 2 additional lots, the impacts associated with that are relatively minor. It's not a zone change to R2 where you're adding, 17 units per acre. So we really don't see any nexus to a condition associated with the zone change itself. The conditions are more associated with the subdivision. Did that answer the question?
Basically, but there were 2 other votes that were in opposition.
Yeah, I think Commissioner McGriff, added conditions of approval that she wanted to see, then did vote against it because of her concern about stormwater. And then Commissioner Espy did talk a little bit about concerns at the Ames and Swan intersection, and you had buses dropping off kids there, and you had cars parked there to pick up the children. Was one of the concerns that he had identified, as well as he did bring up conditionally approving a zone change, but I don't think that's really the case here. If you separated these, there really wouldn't be conditions associated with that zone change. And Commissioner Guile had concerns about traffic, especially on Holcomb Avenue, just changing the zoning in the area, didn't feel it was appropriate.
I had hoped to hear that somehow that there wouldn't be any additional flow into the detention ponds, but we have additional roofs there, even though it's only 2.
And I would clarify that the applicant did agree in the R8 zone to utilize the R10 front yard setbacks. So in R8 they're 15, R10 they're 20. The applicant did verbally agree to that. Or if the commission does move to recommend approval, we would recommend adding, just for clarity, an additional condition, just clarifying that the R10 front yard setbacks shall be met in the R8 zone.
Normally I support increased density for the simple fact that if we don't do that, then somehow development will further extend into the urban growth boundary, and eventually the urban growth boundary will be expanded. So generally I support greater density. This only produces 2 additional lots. I wish I felt more comfortable about the drainage issue, but I don't. But I don't think the zone change is going to make any difference if the request came in for an R10. Is that generally staff approval directly?
Correct.
And we have staff approval directly. Either citizens or neighborhood associations could appeal that decision. Would the appeal first go, and the appeal would go directly to the city commission, would it not?
Correct.
And so we could hear the issue that way again. I don't think the zone change is going to change greatly or if at all, the impact on the storm drain system. But that doesn't mean I'm not concerned about it.
Yeah.
But the point is, the R10 would probably have just as much impact as producing the 2 additional houses. I'm just wondering if there are any conditions that we could apply that would guarantee that there would be no additional impact on this that would not exist in the R10. Guaranteeing the roof area is no greater than you'd get under R10. I doubt if the streets and sidewalks would be, they're going to be there in any case.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've got an answer to that whatsoever.
You know,
We have a couple minutes to talk with staff, and they could suggest a couple things.
You have something you want to suggest right at the moment?
If the record were open, I would, yes.
Can we reopen a discussion to deal with specific facts?
You could reopen the record to it is applicant's final rebuttal. So as long as they don't bring up new evidence.
The alternative, if there's a discussion of staff that they feel is necessary, we don't have to vote on this tonight.
Where are we on the 100?
Or do we?
I think we should just.
Let's listen to my question.
I think essentially, the opportunity would be to over-detain, right? You build a larger pond than you need, and you overtain, but you're still releasing water at a set rate.
Right.
I'm not sure that the issue here is with the design standards of the city. I think it's with a poorly designed downstream. So how do you balance that? That's on private property, based on anecdotal evidence, right? So, like you said, how does that receiving water function?
The testimony we give is assuming we're going to have a greater impact than the pre-development impact was, which we believe will not be the case. If anything, that impact would be reduced.
That is the intention of how those ponds are designed.
Yes.
Realistically, essentially this was originally a 29 lot subdivision. It came in at 27. The pond was designed for 29 lots. That wasn't amended. Essentially, we just changed the site plan. We didn't redo the data. So, if they were to construct at 29, you're essentially over detaining in that case. I don't know how else you would. You don't have a whole lot of ways to control how water leaves a property.
You say you reduce the orifice of the outflow. More water builds up in the process, you create greater pressure. I'm not sure if the water might come out at a higher rate and may not be there. So
John, you're the engineer. You're building the pond bigger.
You're suggesting reduce the orifice to something even less than what the pre-designed flow rate was. That would require a bigger pond. I'm not sure that we've got that capacity in the pond.
They're not going to close.
So.
What is the period of time we have before a decision has to be rendered? If this is the kind of thing that we have to go into a second reading in, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So do we have enough commission meetings left before us?
I'm trying to bring it up.
Okay.
Yeah. You could do two readings in one meeting, assuming unanimity.
Yeah, that's right. I know that.
Right. I'm not sure that's
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's a big assumption.
Based on our discussion, it's not clear that'll be the case. What I'm trying to do is to have a way to guarantee this additional 2 houses will not create any additional impact on the storm flow. You have additional roof space, so I don't think I can make that guarantee, but if you had a smaller orifice, then you guarantee the water going out would be slowed down a bit, and it could more than make up for the additional 2 roofs.
One just observation, just looking at the neighboring property that's at R10. The footprint of those houses between an R10 and an R8, the larger the lot, the larger the footprint of the house, the larger the driveway, the larger of the patio, all those things. So again, we're talking about 2 lots. I get the concern, but you're not, it's not a direct relationship between impervious surfaces. It's not as if there's an additional 2 lots of impervious surface.
I understand that. I understand that, and I was just trying to look at where that.
July 5th. So the 120 obligation runs on July 5th. So essentially, there was going to be a hearing tonight, and then the first hearing in July to meet that July 5th.
So in other words, we really have to do it tonight.
Well,
well,
would you like to have a conversation with the applicant to see if they're willing to extend the 120?
Reading on the next one, and you'd have to have a unanimous vote on the first reading.
If the applicant were to extend the 120-day deadline, we could come back with something else as well.
What would you like us to address if we were able to do that? What would you like us to?
Could we direct staff here to request the applicant to extend the deadline so that we could have the things that we're discussing here, and we have the traffic issue and so forth, but the dominant thing that we're hearing really is the concern about drainage.
Well, let me suggest this: we can't request. The 120-day deadline is completely controlled by the applicant. They can do what they want. Maybe a short recess to allow the applicant and staff to get together for a few minutes and give us 5-10 minutes. Okay.
Let's come together 20 after.
And no one please no one discuss this with us while we're on our break.
We're silent as we leave this. Don't. The applicants and our staff have been communicating to try to address some of the concerns we brought out, and I think they're going to say something.
Sure. Yeah. So based on what we were hearing, so what are the methods to try to address that? One condition of approval could be that the applicant shall improve the off-site drainage ditch to the north of the property. The improvement shall consist of erosion control measures and excavation of the drainage ditch near Forsyth Road. So on that private property in the county, essentially between up by Sears Farm, so at the very north end of Sears Farm, past their greenhouses, between the greenhouses and the road, there would be opportunities in there for erosion control measures and potentially excavation of that ditch. The second one would be that the applicant shall not connect a minimum of 2 lots to the public storm system, and the applicant shall utilize French drains, sumps, or other on-site storm detention measures approved by the city engineer. So essentially, we take those 2 extra homes out of, so the downspouts would not be connected out to the street, which would then go to the storm pond. They would utilize on-site, whether it be French drain, sump, or other measure, rain garden, as approved by the city engineer to address the stormwater coming off roofs for a minimum of 2 homes.
Are those are either or? Those are 2 conditions.
Those are 2 conditions that we're recommending both.
Okay, now on the private property, what's the issue with the private property owner?
My understanding is that the applicant has had initial discussions with the private property owner, and they're amenable to improvements to that storm drainage ditch. It's certainly, if something goes awry, they have a condition that requires this.
What are French drains?
John, you want to take a better whack at this than me?
They're basically an infiltration.
I've got some. They're drains that go under the soil that have openings, so the downspout can go to a French drain on the property, and they have these openings on the drain that let the water out into the property that's producing.
An even pattern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, more or less an even pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
was that a good definition?
Oh, it's perfect.
John's
like, just the city engineer.
Thank you.
Does somebody wish to put forward a motion that includes these two additional conditions?
And the additional one that the R8 subdivision will comply with the R10 front yard setback.
One more time.
That the properties, if this is approved, that the properties that are zoned R8 shall comply with the R10 front yard setback.
Yes. That wasn't there before?
It was discussed and agreed to by the applicant, but we didn't add a condition. I think for clarity's sake, I would recommend adding a condition of approval.
So there'll be 3 conditions. Who's going to be the bold one that starts?
Well, I can tell you I will be a no.
That's fine. You could put forward a motion and vote against it. Or you can second a motion and vote against it.
With the improvement to the off-site drainage ditch is what I was looking for.
Well, we have that, and they're willing to accept 2 others.
That's a big deal, because right now it seems like it's not working, and to get that working seems like it'd be better for everybody involved, the people that are already there and the new people coming. So that,
the applicant is willing to accept all 3 conditions.
right. Okay, I move that with the 3 conditions, do I have to read the 3 conditions?
Yes.
Oh,
You
Phil
move
can do it.
we're doing a first reading. You can accept the conditions as Tony put them forward, but I think we understand them.
Yeah, you can say, with the addition of the conditions that, Community Development Director stated, move approval of the first reading.
Okay, I move the approval of the first reading with the conditions that were stated.
Second.
Motion's been made by Carol Polney, seconded by Commissioner Smith, and we're waiting for the vote.
Do we have the first reading?
Oh, we got it. I did very well the last time with Ed Sullivan here. I got them both right, but we'll get the
We do
first
what we
reading.
can. Ordinance number 14-1007, an ordinance amending Title 17 zoning, Chapter 1706-020 of the official zoning map of the Oregon City Municipal Code by changing a portion of the property identified as Clackamas County Map 2-2E-21DC-01300, Clackamas County Map 2-2E-21DC-01600, Clackamas County Map 2-2E-28AB-01600 from S10 Single Family Dwelling District to R8 Single Family Dwelling District and improving a 27-lot subdivision, Oregon City Planning Files ZC 1401 and TP 1401.
And those included the conditions.
Including the 3 additional conditions.
I will state that that's the first time I heard you stutter during when you were fast.
Those numbers just...
You don't have the perfect record that you did before. The vote, please. 3 in favor and 1 opposed. The first reading passes. We'll see this on a second reading at our next meeting. Thank you all. Some of you won't be happy, but we really were meeting the conditions that dealt with the drainage issue and the additional 2 houses to the extent we could. If this hadn't come forward, it could come forward as a 10-lot subdivision, and the drainage issue might have been more of an issue for that, and we wouldn't hear it unless it came up on appeal. So I thank you all. I thank also the applicants for working with us on this particular issue.
And the Planning Commission for all the work they've done.
Yes.
With the applicants.
Okay, now we go back to the agenda. I'm not sure any of these are as difficult for us. We have a proposed zone change from R8 single family R6 to a R6 family and a 10-lot subdivision located 19751 and 1975 Myers Road.
And that's...
We'll get the staff report first.
Sorry.
So essentially, there's no action that needs to be taken tonight.
Oh, that's right.
So we had notified the
it's
public
been
that there would be a
rejected.
public hearing tonight, but the Planning Commission did deny this application.
So
They are
it
the
is
final
denied.
decision unless it's appealed.
But they get an opportunity to tell me that we're not going to entertain this. So, do we need a motion? We don't need a motion to that effect because it's not even before us because the Planning Commission denied it.
Correct.
With that, it looks like we're into general business.
The appeal.
Yep. Appeal of Public Works Director's decision to deny a request for a system development charge reduction for redevelopment on 7th Street. This has been a topic that's been before us. We'll hear from staff first, and then we'll hear from the applicant.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, you have heard this. This has been before you. We had a public hearing. We closed the public hearing. So as far as I understand, Bill, this public hearing is closed, remains closed. And last direction on at the public hearing, staff was directed to try to go back and work with the applicant to try to find enough or find some way to get to a way that we could not deny this application, but find a solution that would meet the applicant's needs or their desire to see the SDCs reduced. So we have looked at that in detail. Our concern is that we don't set a precedent that might come before you again in a different form, and we really don't feel like there is a good reason to not deny the approval. We understand that the Commission was interested in finding a solution, and with that we brought at a subsequent meeting, which Betty you missed, so hopefully you had a chance to review the packet, was about a code change that would, or several code changes, but the big one was to take the definition of existing use from 18 months, which it currently is, to 8 years. And so that's still where we're proposing. We think that's the right way to deal with this particular applicant, to deny the appeal and wait. The only problem with that was that there's a 90-day notice period that we need to follow on the code changes that we're proposing. So we've started that 90-day clock. We've actually sent out our notice already. We've developed a web page for the code changes that we're proposing, and we're suggesting that we work with the applicant in 90 days after we've adopted the code changes. And at that point in time, while they wouldn't get a full credit of their previous use SDCs, the way we've set that up is applicants in the future, the way the code is written now is applicants in the future, if their property has been without a use for 4 years, and they're completing they're applying for a building application within that 4-year period, they would get full credit. If they're between 4 and 8 years, they would get 50% of that credit. And we felt like that was aligned with what the Commission had kind of given us direction, and at work session that's what we worked through. So we think that's the right way to do it, and it's in a way that this Commission won't set any precedent with regard to criteria that is there's always a storyline that we hear from the development community about why they feel that their proposals should qualify for more reduction, and so it's a very slippery slope to be on, and that's why we're recommending denial of the appeal.
I'm going to pose a question now. Can they reapply under this new?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Under the new code, they would reapply, and so the real issue is just the 90 days.
Okay. Now the next
I guess
question.
there's the one other issue is we're assuming that the City Commission will approve our code
Thank
change.
you. I was wondering.
Well, we actually gave the direction.
Yeah, we did have the workshop.
We had a work session on this, and we gave direction to move this direction because we felt the 18-month period was not sufficient. Now, are they going to should they come in? Should we deny they come in with a reapplication? Are they going to have to? Can we waive the fees for the application given they paid fees for this one? Are we in a position to waive fees?
That's another interesting topic that Bill brought to our attention, which is typically we wouldn't make a decision on this SDC credit until they apply for their building permits. They haven't actually applied for their building permits. And the way the code is written, they need to apply for building permits before we deny this, the SDC appeal. So I'm feeling a little embarrassed about that, but at the same time, these commercial developments, we're proactively working with applicants to give them detailed estimates based on what they're proposing to do. And so it is a little bit of cart before the horse here, but so they haven't paid fees, I guess is what I'm trying to say. With regard to this development, they haven't come in for their building permit.
So no application, I mean, there's been no cost to them in this?
That's my understanding, unless there's some charge for pulling together an estimate.
Nope, there is
I think
no
that's,
charge.
you know, an attempt.
So there are no fees being paid here, so there'd be no reason for us to do any waiver of fees if it came back to us, because nothing's been paid out.
Correct.
There's been obviously time for that they paid out for their architect to come forward and so forth.
Yeah.
This is not open to the public at this point.
I understand that. I understand.
It's a closed hearing unless they open.
Can we have the applicant respond to what we're putting forward without opening the public hearing?
Not without opening the public hearing, but you know they're really the only ones who can, likely the only ones who can appeal anything that comes out of this. So if you do want to hear from the applicant, you could.
I would like to hear from the applicant. Is there a consensus?
That's fine.
Mhm.
I have
Okay.
some more questions and statements.
Well, you might have more questions after the applicant speaks. You want to come forward?
Todd Iceland Architects, representing the Vespalis, who are the owners of the property.
We saw an email from you.
Yes, and I sent an email prior to your work session as well, and we were quite surprised. We did not feel that this really met the intent of the commission when we left here last time. The 8 years all of a sudden became 4 years, and you know that 4 year to 8 year period is going to cost them an extra $32,000. It's pretty significant. This is not a developer. This is a doctor who wants to build his own office. I mean, development is not his business, although he's being a developer in this case. In light of that and the fact that there was nothing retroactive in this language, as we were told that there would be previously, we felt that we needed to have some additional time to review that. They wanted to seek legal counsel and ask for a continuance to bring this before you at the next commission meeting.
Okay, I guess the other position would be to deny this, given that we're at this position, and we fall back to Bill's position, which is until they come in and apply for a building permit, you know, we shouldn't have been where we're at right now. Now, that's not to say that the applicant wouldn't have come in and applied for a building permit, but I suppose he's got another opportunity to do it, to apply again and apply for his building permit, and we kind of go through this process.
The point is, we could deny at this point during the period before we have this. He's going to have any objections he has to what we're put forward at that through the regular process of changing the code.
Right. Yeah, you know, as part of the code amendment, they can bring in whatever concerns they might have about the approach that you know staff brought back to the commission. Yeah, you know, and if you were to deny it, nothing prevents them from asking for another estimate now or after the code changes, and ultimately it's when the SDC actually gets assessed that, you know, the rubber hits the road. That's when you make the final decision on what the actual SDC will be.
Given what the SDCs could potentially be, I am pretty certain that the applicant will not apply for building permits. They will purchase property elsewhere. That's the direction.
Well, I don't want to get into that, but the point is, when we're going through this code revision, you can express alternatives to the code during that period of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand that. It's.
I understand what
we,
you're saying.
We can't really
I
submit
don't-
for building permits.
I don't want to get in a bargaining situation where he builds in
Yeah.
Oregon City or builds someplace else, or builds someplace else. That's beyond, I think, the scope right at this point.
One of the,
we recognize, I think we recognize that people have been at a disadvantage under our current code. We're trying to deal with that, but I don't want to have our process interfered with by the fact that somebody might go someplace else in the development. Right. So
the other point I would just reemphasize, which is, the demand for SDCs and is high, whether it be transportation, sewer, water, stormwater, parks, all the SDCs that we have, we've typically got project lists that far exceed our ability to kind of collect those and your ability to set those. So, and in this particular case, again, the piece that's ironic is we've spent SDCs on 7th Street in front of this property, which that property benefits from. So this property has already kind of received that.
And I think we're coming to arguments that might come forward at a different point. The question before us is to whether to deny the application or not. Realizing that we have some code revisions that are being recommended, realizing the applicant can reapply if they wish to under any changed code amendments that we make, and we have a proposed code amendment that's going to be coming forward to us that we can revise ourselves.
The thing I have a hard time with is just the amount of time it's adding on to the process. And I understand we have to go through this, but I wish there was a quicker way we could do it, because from the development standpoint, and this is the building season.
These are building season, yes.
So, and they were kind of led to think that this was going to be solved somehow sometime
Would be
soon.
retroactive,
so
is what Mr. Sullivan
I
had
struggle with
indicated.
that part.
Well, I mean, I don't think this precludes the applicant to continue talking about bankrupting, percent interest charged under the application they came forward with. But the point is that application should not have come forward at this time anyway. Is that right?
We're not talking about an application. We're talking about an estimate that the city gave in an attempt to be transparent. So, but all those are topics that we can discuss with the applicant.
Bill, let me just so I'm clear. There wouldn't be any impediment to the applicant. I know there's some risk because they're not 100% positive that the commission would adopt the amendments that we've recommended. Of course, they could not then develop if they chose, if the commission didn't follow through on that. But if they were comfortable with that risk, they could still proceed, and because the assessments don't come in until a little bit later, so there's a lot of work that could be done in the next. It's not quite 90 days left, right? 80 or whatever it's been. We noticed it a while ago. So in that period, they could get a lot done as far as moving forward on construction.
Right. The assessment comes in when the building permit is submitted. Whatever code changes are made could be done in such a way that they apply to permits in the process, but they don't actually get paid until
So they could be well underway with plan review before, so that it wouldn't be a total loss of the season.
If they felt comfortable with that.
They would have to.
That old trust us we got last time is not feeling so good.
Well,
we had a work session.
We
made a recommendation.
The alternative was that we could go through a bankrupting process, which I imagine that's an alternative that's still open at an interest rate. So that's still an open alternative.
Yes.
I don't know that we discussed anything else.
Oh. Is it my turn now?
It's your turn.
Oh, thank you. So I did watch the work session. Thank you, John. And I'm kind of confused about the 90-day noticing. You were given direction to move forward. So does the commission not have to to adopt the changes before you send out the 90 days to people? I mean, I was kind of...
The 90 days is 90 days for essentially the public hearing for the code changes. So we did a work session sharing with you what we were planning to present at the public hearing. So we have to give 90 days notice that we're having a public hearing to adopt code changes.
Okay.
And at that public hearing, there will be opportunities if what we're proposing that could change again. Obviously, that's part of the reason for the work session, but you weren't there, so there may be something more that comes up. Or, I mean, even if you were there, there's still opportunity for change.
Okay. So that's, in my opinion, totally separate from the appeal process, in my mind. Because code changes can happen, but I think the appeal process that we're looking at, I still think they should get some sort of credit for business there. And I know that I'm probably the Lone Ranger here, and that's okay. So I just think that, we need to become a bit more business friendly.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to do. The point is that if we simply do this in this case, we're opening ourselves up to others coming in.
Well, then I guess we maybe deserve that if we have this before us on accident because they didn't get their planning permits done.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, it is what it is.
Well, the alternative we're given that I suppose is still open, that they can operate under the current one and have a Bancrofting where they pay the SDCs over time.
Sure, they have that option.
They've got that option.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm not sure what else we would be able to do.
Commissioner Mumm, just so you know, the code doesn't have a lot of latitude as written right now, and if you remember when we first brought this up, it wasn't necessarily about our estimate. It wasn't about the way we dealt with this particular applicant. This was all about that specific definition of prior use at 18 months. So we just don't have that latitude to make that change. And in order for you to make that change, it's important that you have solid findings that significantly differentiate this case from something else, so that when someone else appeals your SDCs, they don't look back at this particular decision. And
no, I understand that, but I think it's going to be a moot point because the other code is going to be adopted. Correct?
That's what we don't know that.
I mean, it's going to be.
Hopefully it won't be adopted in the form that's proposed. I mean, and it most likely will not, from what I'm hearing from developers that are going to be opposed to it.
They'd rather see the 18 months?
They'd rather see no time frame.
We never even recommended no time frame.
Yeah.
What we did find out was that we had a great deal of latitude in terms of the Bancrofting period and the interest rate.
That's correct.
And that we could do without the code changes.
Yes.
And those are, I think, the only two topics we had. I don't think we ever said that we would have an indefinite period or a no period in this process. And since one point out, some cities have that, many cities don't.
Yes.
Right.
But that, in my opinion, is a different topic.
I think these are two separate
it's just
topics.
Separate. The appeal, in my opinion, is separate from the code changes.
Yes, and
I'm thinking that we should give them a little bit of credit here.
Yeah, I think that they should get credit too. But my argument is our code, what it says now, and the time frame, and all those people that operated under that code and within that time frame that did pay their SDCs. What about them? And that's the whole position that I come from. I'm very, very sympathetic to them and what they're trying to do, and I understand they're busy business people. Maybe they didn't read the code to begin with. Maybe they didn't know about the time limit. I don't know that information. I want to make sure that the communication's out there so people know about that. And we've agreed that we want to look at, changing that and extending that. So
Right.
This is a toughie.
The alternative, in my opinion, is to take the current STC amount we had and to go ahead and permit a bankrupting period and a low interest rate over that time. I mean, we could.
Well,
we
that's,
could
they could
act
choose
on
to
it.
do that or not.
Well, no, that'd have to be our decision right here.
Oh, I see.
And Mayor, well, you don't have to decide that on their behalf. They can make that choice.
Yeah. Right.
But if I were an applicant facing that or waiting till the 90
Well, I
days goes,
understand that.
that's
all we're getting suggestions of is the development community wants a no time limit and all that kind of stuff, and that's not what's before us. We did not recommend that.
But what I've
at any
been
point.
hearing is that you want some credit. You were hoping for some credit for this, and what I'm telling you is it's nearly half. It's nearly 50%.
I understand.
And so that's not nothing.
Yeah.
It might not be enough to please the applicant, but it's not
I
nothing.
understand. And so I say I think there are two alternatives. We wait for the code change.
Right.
They choose to see what comes out of it. And in the process, we might even make the code change more liberal than what you're presenting, but we don't have that before us. And
No.
they could wait that out.
Yep.
Or they could make a decision that they want to proceed or not proceed and go someplace else and proceed under a bankrupting agreement under the current code.
Or we could approve a discount. Is that another choice?
I'm sure we could, but
They're not
not
willing
be-
to do that because they don't want to go down that slippery slope.
I mean, one of the things in the code that says, modify the fee, it should contain a methodology and consider the cost of existing facilities, prior contributions by existing users. Those are the same points you're bringing up. Again, a pretty slippery slope to jump out onto and then have past development community who's paid that, I don't know what they would do with that. But doesn't.
Well, I imagine we could be
forth
sued
with
for any
legal
reason,
action? They could.
but if we make this exception, there were others in that same position, could they come back after us?
Have to look at it, but it would probably be limited to a certain time period. In a certain time period, you lose your ability to come back at the city for fees that are paid. I think we looked at that when we had the SDC issue, and there was I can't remember what the timeline was, but it's a potential.
Your motion? The motion could be denied, or the motion could be made to give a discount based upon some decision this commission makes.
Well,
I
struggle with it.
I think sorry.
Go ahead.
I struggled with this. Is the first discussion that we had about it, and my concern at that point was, just as what we're talking about tonight. This commission, as we are usually very willing to work on solutions that work or that help, that's what we did. And to then come back and then say, well, that's not exactly what we wanted. I don't think that's what we should be talking about tonight. I think at this point, I feel that we are making an effort to address an issue with our code that has been brought up that we acknowledge needs to be worked on. I think that's completely separate from what is on the agenda tonight, which is this appeal. I think based on what we've discussed, what our staff is working on, I think we can deny the appeal, and it's up to them if they want to come through under the changes that we make or don't make. I don't know why we as a commissioner being sitting here in front of an applicant that's basically saying, well, if you don't do this, we're going to leave. that's not what we're supposed to be doing here, and it doesn't feel right, and it doesn't resolve the issues that we've brought up at the past meeting. So I would move to deny the appeal.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Smith.
With no second.
There's a second. I've seconded the motion. Well, we got 3 in favor and 1 opposed. So there are alternatives available. Thank you. I would say they're not quite divorced because I think this triggered the decision that our code needed work. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
we're taking that action. We are required to go through a 90-day period before we approve code amendments, and the choices are still there to actually operate under the current SDC conditions and request a bankrupting period and a low interest rate, or to wait on their application after we have a new code in place.
Yes.
And Mayor, our recommendation to staff, we've chewed this thing up pretty hard and
Sure, I know you
for many hours, and we have a very strong consensus behind our recommendation. We think it will minimize appeals because while still paying some respects to those that paid in advance, we also feel like when an applicant comes in at, let's say, year 6 or 7, and we have to say, I'm sorry, we can't give you a full discount, but we can give you 50%. We think in most cases that is going to be a reasonable accommodation that people are going to feel somewhat good about. We also know that the person that comes in 8 years and 3 days is going to not be very satisfied with that, but we looked at the public policy of trying to encourage properties to turn over or to redevelop, and if you don't have the assets to redevelop them within 8 years, our theory was that it probably would be okay for the city for those properties to change hands to people who can develop them. So I don't think our recommendation is going to change, but I know you have a little more time to think about it. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
And waiting patiently, I think, is somebody for a process. Well, it's not that bad. It's only 3 hours of commission time so far. To go to a contract for a construction manager contractor.
Yeah.
Right. So good evening, Mayor and Commission. Tonight we're here to discuss the selection of a construction manager general contractor for the library project, and I'd like to introduce Charlie Ballman, our project manager from Shields, Oblis & Johnson, since he's been waiting so long.
So long.
I want to make sure he at least gets to sit at the podium for a while.
Thank you for your patience.
You might have the question of how did this commission ever get a bond before the public in the first place?
That was a PAC, right? Didn't we decide that tonight? It was a PAC,
I
yeah.
actually think the commission has done yeoman's work tonight. So.
Yeah, seriously. So just a couple of comments of review on the staff report. So on May 20th, as we talked about earlier, the voters approved Measure 3-435 for the bonds authorizing the bonds for construction of the library project. So we've been moving forward since then, and that's included the steps necessary to select CMGC, which is the construction manager general contractor, which is bringing on the contractor early in the process. And that was approved by you on June 4th, and concurrent to that, we ran the published the RFP, and out of that process, we got 5 really good proposals. The selection committee, which consisted of Tony Conkle, myself, Charlie, Sid Scott, the architect, D.A. Hildebrand from the library board, and Denise McGriff from the neighborhood, whittled that down to 3 as pursuant to our RFP. And we interviewed those 3 last week. I can't even remember when. So much has happened. And at that point in time, the selection committee felt that PNC Construction, which is a firm that just did the Sandy Library not long ago, would be the best firm for our project. So tonight, based on the recommendation of the selection committee, staff recommends that the city commission authorize city manager David Frazier to execute the contracts for the CMGC for the renovation of the expansion of the library with PNC Construction. And we are available and at your service for any questions that you might have about this process.
I guess the only question that would come up, because we know we got the bond. I have concerns. Will 10 million do what we want to be done? And the indication I've got from our librarian is yes. Whether there was, what degree of consensus was there on the selection?
It was 4-1.
Okay. Very good. And I guess I don't have to hear the specific reasons of the one. So I guess do we have any questions?
No, but Carol made a motion.
Well, unless we have any other questions.
Well, yeah, I think
Yeah, do we have any other
if a
questions?
member of the public wanted to speak, we let them do it too. So even though it's not a public comment period, we always let people speak to any item. There are no requests to speak, but I do want to find out if the commission has any question. We could have a discussion after the motion's been made, but that might go so fast that we might not have an opportunity for it. So, any other
No, I
questions?
think it's great.
Okay. I seconded the motion. I've been waiting
Thank
for
you
this.
for waiting
I've been
on
waiting for
us.
this for 20 years.
Yes.
Thank you for having something easy
Yes.
to decide on.
Yeah.
It's a
Would you
unanimous-
like to add
unanimous
anything since you've waited all this time?
Well, just that of the 5 proposals that were received, the 3 that we interviewed were all 3 excellent contractors. And the city would have served the city well, any one of them, and would have done a great job on the project. So it was narrow margins that PNC was selected, but they did a terrific job in their interview. Their people seem energized. They really wanted to do the project, and I think they'll be a good general contractor.
Thank you.
Very good.
Well, very good. Now we'll go to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Consent
agenda
Oh, excuse me. Consent agenda. Motion approved.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unanimous. Very good. Thanks.
And I didn't have a problem with this, but John, can you give us a quick little synopsis on the supplement or the property that we're buying for the general population from ODOT?
Yes, I can. So
I think it's a
there's-
great thing, but I think we should tell the audience how we came about that. All the audience know.
So there.
The viewing audience.
So there's a strip of land that ODOT acquired when they built Highway 213, and they bought that fee simple property that essentially they used to build Maple Lane and the interconnection with Thayer as well, Thayer Road. So for years, the county's been maintaining that as though it's Thayer Road.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, we've come to the determination that it's ODOT fee simple property. So they're relinquishing the road right away, which entails basically Maple Lane, at no cost. And we get that gift in its current condition, and we'll continue with maintaining and we'll have the authority over that. The piece of property, the remnant piece of property, which is again fee simple land and owned by ODOT, is what we're purchasing. So we will be purchasing that property for future discussion about how we whether we keep that property or whether we turn that property. But we will at this point your decision is, do we buy it and control that property?
Yeah. It was only the right thing to do.
And we'll be using transportation system development charges for that, because it's all associated with configuration of what that road looks like. In the TSP, it actually shows a roundabout in that stretch and wider road section through there. So, there's lots of iterations of what that could look like, but having this extra land will help. And
That's great. I just wanted to have that on the record, so that, people
I'm
know.
going to make a request in the future, because on a couple times I pulled things off consent agenda, not because I thought that it was going to be denied or anything, but to give a public airing of it.
Yeah.
If somebody wants that, I would prefer that they pull it off the consent agenda,
Right.
so we do have an audience to speak to.
Well, I guess you're right. I should have done that. Sorry.
So in the future, if we could do that.
Okay.
But we've already passed the consent agenda.
Right.
Now I can turn to the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I have good news tonight, some exciting news from our Community Development Department about some nominations to the National Register that have happened. And some of you probably have already heard about it, but Tony, could you give us a quick summary?
So we have finally received confirmation letters from the State Historic Preservation Office confirming that the McLaughlin Promenade, Carnegie Library, and the Oregon City Municipal Elevator were officially listed in the National Register of Historic Places on May 15th of this year. As part of that application and grant work that we did, we also were working with the owners of the Masonic Lodge, and so that, while they decided not to list it on the National Register, it's been found to be eligible. And so if a future property owner or the existing one changes their mind, it would be simply contacting the keeper of the National Register and requesting that that facility, that structure be placed on it, and we could facilitate that to happen as well. So.
I guess the question I would have is this going to mess up our ability to make an addition to the current Carnegie Library?
No, the Carnegie Building would have fallen under.
I know.
We still would have had to comply with the local requirements for the historic review board that were in place.
Exactly right.
Thank you, Tony. Next item is some of you may have seen emails from, I believe it's a former chair of the Kanema Neighborhood Association, Paul Edgar. His neighborhood is in a little bit of uproar about who's the chair and who isn't, and how they do their elections, and there's some confusion around their bylaws. I've received emails from Paul. I haven't been able to respond back to them, making various accusations against our staff, and in particular noticing that, or saying that we failed to provide adequate notice, that their bylaws require a 7-day notice for every meeting. I haven't looked at their bylaws, but the staff that sent out the notice said that they're actually confused about that the 7-day notice is for special meetings under their bylaws. All other meetings are within a reasonable time, which is what we do. And Katie received the request and did her job and did it correctly. So anyway, we do make mistakes, and that's a good segue into one that I think we need to reveal as well. This past weekend Public Works was doing some work at one of our pump stations, and there was a failure there, and we're not exactly sure what happened, but Public Works is investigating it. We had a sewer overflow there, so they're going to investigate it, and I've directed them to create additional protocols for backup systems, because we do have backup systems there, but even that didn't work this time, so they're going to be taking some corrective actions, and we'll report back when we have more details from them.
How much of a spill was there?
That's one of the details that we're still tabulating.
Okay.
Yeah. But it happened last weekend. Also last weekend, there was some sort of a paintball or some sort of a thing on the Blue Heron property. Some filming that went on around this. There were apparently no noises, but there were, fake guns and some actors and stuff there apparently. What we've been able to determine is that was we had a partners group meeting earlier this week, a really positive meeting actually on the project. And the owner was there, and apparently this was an agreement that the trustee had worked out previous to the closing. And among the couple million details that those guys were all dealing with, I'm not surprised if this one slipped through, but the property owner's been really good about keeping us in the loop of different activities that are happening there, and I think they are going to be a little bit more hands-on next time there's something like that. So I do think it brought some people to the downtown, which isn't a bad thing. There were a couple hundred people there. So, also, I'm going to hand out the goals progress report. I know you guys get these periodically, but we want to keep you informed, and so keep this, if you will, and take a look, and you'll see. If you see something we've missed, of course, let me know. And then we've also added some activities that aren't in the goals, but they're still nonetheless important based on opportunities that come our way. Like, for example, the opportunity to fix this code deficiency that we saw from 18 months to 8 years. And then I also wanted to let you know that on Mount Pleasant, we are continuing to work through our due diligence period. The school district's attorney, we were waiting for some time for some information back from the district through their attorney, and we finally got most of what we needed. We're not quite finished with our due diligence, and we need a little bit more time to talk to you folks in executive session right before the closing. The district would prefer to close before June 30th. I don't think that's realistic given your schedule and the amount of... We did get the information, but we got it, and then they said, can we close next week or something? And we're like, well, no, because we still need time to present that information to you. And one of them, there's some reversionary language that we discovered in the due diligence period, looking at the title report and all that sort of thing. We think can be worked through, but we want to give you a chance to talk about it in an executive session. Okay. So we're still on track. I don't think there's anything here that's that serious, but I just wanted you to know that we were making progress, but it might not be exactly on the schedule the district would prefer. So let's see, what else? And I think that's everything, except also to remind you that I will be on vacation all of next week, and Tony Conkle will be serving as the acting city manager during my absence. And I will be off the grid, I think, so I don't think I'll have any access to technology, including telephones.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that Tony Conkle, as part of the staff report, perhaps discuss a little bit more detail or were you going to speak to it at all about the partners group? And you can introduce it, and then the two of us can speak to it in more detail.
Do you want to talk, David, or you want me to?
Well, we were all there, so not all
okay.
of us, but
So
we've been we've been having our regular partnership meetings, and Doug and I have actually been doing a little having
I want to
some
include that in my report.
conversations.
Carol Paul is our other partner. She might want to speak to.
I'm not going to give any details. We've been talking with our other elected representatives at the state about additional funding for the site, $10 million of additional funding, and I think they're going to be working hard on that. So Tony and his staff have continued the tours. At this partners meeting this week, we were fortunate because the owner and his head planner were there, Mr. Hyde Gherkin, and John Potter is the planner. He was with them, and it was a really positive conversation that we had. And Mayor, I'll let you and Commissioner Pauly fill in the details.
Well, I'm going to make a report on a couple things first, and I'll let the others speak. And if I have something to add to what Commissioner Pauly wants to say, I'll go ahead and speak to it afterwards. Most people know that we have a seat at the Metro Policy Advisory Committee as the second largest city in the county. It usually meets on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month. This year there will not be a meeting. However, there is going to be a tour. I'm going to go on it. It's going to be at Forest Grove, and we'll be looking at actually what TriMet has provided in terms of loop service in Forest Grove. The mayor of Forest Grove has been pleased with what they're doing. It seems to be something that TriMet is considering for Oregon City in terms of providing better service into the residential areas. And I can send information to you where and when that tour is going to be. I can tell you when, but how to get to it is another issue. So if anybody's interested in that, I can provide the information. I'm planning to do that tour. I don't know if anybody in Public Works might be interested in that tour or not.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would be.
So that'll be on this coming Wednesday, and so I'll just go ahead and email to you all what how to get there and so forth.
Okay.
I'll start at my left, and then if I want to add something else on the partners thing, I can do it. So Commissioner Pauly.
Okay, well, I don't have too much to add. I think David summed it up pretty good. But it was the first time that all of the partners were in the room with the new owners of the Falls Legacy LLC. And so that was very positive. And I think everybody felt rest assured after that meeting. So the MOU was discussed as the next step, as well as public access, getting the walkway down there, and how that is going to be funded. And the state just wants to see that we're going to have matching funding. And of course, with all the entities involved, we all have multiple funding sources that we will look into in getting that walkway funded. And the process is still, moving along really well. And that's all I have.
I just comment, George Heideggen said all of the right things, including was talking about reuse of great buildings there. I think John Potter is going to be the person that actually looks at the details in terms of what's possible. So I was very pleased with what I heard. It sounds like they're going to work with us on getting the easement that we need for public access. They recognize that is probably one of the most important things. Mr. Heideggen indicated that it's not going to be a fast process, which we all know. He's talking about the 20-year horizon and so on, but recognizes the need for as early as possible public access to the falls.
Mayor, maybe I should also remind the rest of the commissioners that we'll be starting public hearings soon for the zone change. Our staff has been meeting with the owner and his staff, and it looks like there's just a very small change to one of the buildings that has a foundation, but in our original plan it showed green space, and he wanted to preserve the option of reconstructing something on that platform. So we're looking at a very small percentage change to the original master plan, and that's all that we've encountered so far, and that's really good for us because we've got a lot of work involved, and we were pleased that he seems to be seeing things our way, if you will, according to what the communities said they want there. So we're going to be focused on that zone change in the land use application, and the other thing we're going to be focused on is securing the easement for the Riverwalk. So
it should be that all people sitting on this commission will be able to see the master plan and vote on it.
Yay.
Mr. Munn.
I don't have anything.
I don't have anything.
Oh, yeah, you're on vacation from school.
Yes, I am. Oh, and look at how wonderful it is. I get to